the regular meeting for February 20, 2020 for the Village of Tinley Park Plan Commission to order. Please stand at this time for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Secretary, at this time, can you please take roll call?
Stanton, Engel, Manny,
Here.
Gatto,
Here.
Fielder,
Present.
Gaskell,
Here.
Aitchison,
Here.
Vic,
Here.
Chairman Gray.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. Staff, at this time, are there any communications?
No.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the January 16, 2020 meeting?
So moved.
Commissioner Fielder,
Second.
Commissioner Aitchison. All those in favor of approving the January 16, 2020 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. We'll move on to item 1, which is a workshop. The first item on the agenda this evening is a workshop for the Top Hospitality LLC doing business as Marriott Courtyard and Residence Inn at 9551 and 9555 183rd Street to consider recommending that the village board grant Top Hospitality LLC, the property owner, a map amendment, rezoning, and variations from the zoning code for 2 parcels that total approximately 8.7 acres in size at 9551 and 9555 183rd Street off of White Eagle Drive and south of 183rd Street. The parcels are proposed to be zoned B3, General Business and Commercial, upon annexation. Upon annexation, the granting of these requests will allow for the lots to be developed as 2 Marriott brand hotels, Courtyard and Residence Inn. The request will also include a plat of re-subdivision and site plan approval. Staff, if you could please make your presentation at this time.
Sure. Yeah, so we have an exciting project here for 2 new hotels on the west side of town, near LaGrange and 183rd. So just giving an overview, the site's what we're looking at above. Some of the square footages in the staff report I noticed were a little off and based on previous plans, but the Courtyard is an 83,722 square foot, 4-story hotel with 125 guest rooms. There's a banquet hall, meeting rooms. Amenities include exterior patio, fitness center, indoor pool. There's a lounge that'll have dining and a bar. And then they're proposing to build a Residence Inn at the same time as that Courtyard. That'll be 87,875 square feet. That'll have 118 rooms, and then that one's marketed more towards extended stay guests and has amenities like a fitness center, dining room, meeting rooms, lounge rooms, indoor pool, and an outdoor basketball court and an outdoor patio there. So they'll have a shared detention pond, and there's an existing wetland on the site as well. So just brief overview there. And so the parcel that they're looking to develop these 2 hotels on, it's not quite on 183rd and White Eagle Drive, but it's just south of that, where 183rd connects to Harlem Avenue, so just LaGrange, just east of LaGrange and just south of 183rd Street. It's currently unincorporated. It's zoned C4 in Cook County, which is comparable to kind of our B3. It's just kind of a general business category, and among the loosest in the county zoning hierarchy. The land's undeveloped. It's traditionally kind of been used just for farming purposes. There is an existing wetland on the southwest corner of the property. You can even see it in the aerial, a natural low spot there. It is the annexation of this property that they're proposing, and it'll go to the Community Development Committee. Also includes the adjacent right-of-way to the south of this that was originally planned for 183rd to kind of directly connect to LaGrange. But when they did 183rd, they kind of took it up. And so exactly. So technical difficulties done there. So to the south of this property is the WLS radio tower. So if you're out that way, that's the thing you'll probably. You'll definitely get the static. The high frequency radio tower that's out there is just to the south of this, and that's also unincorporated in the county's C4 zoning district. To the west of this is a parcel zoned B3 that's a vacant parcel. To the north and to the east of this is kind of that odd-shaped parcel that kind of connects around this parcel. That is zoned ORI and is a vacant parcel that's kind of farmed at the same time as this parcel. And to the northwest of this are the current hotels that are out in the area off of the LaGrange Road, I-80 exit, going north, that have Country Inn and Suites, the Hilton Garden Inn, Texas Roadhouse, and Jumbo Crab that's out there. And then there's a third restaurant pad that's undeveloped currently. So that's kind of to the southwest of this site. To get to that site, you also take White Eagle, which is what will connect to this. So White Eagle will kind of be our new hotel row out on near LaGrange Road. The site is also in the Urban Design Overlay District, which we've had come up in kind of some of the recent approvals. So that's promotes walkability, kind of decreased frontages, just a general more urbanized look to the environment, tries to push buildings towards the street, cross connectivity, walkability, those types of uses. So we'll kind of get into that. There's a couple variations attached to that, but for the most part, they've met kind of the intent of what that was designed for. Again, the proposed use, I already kind of went over that, but it's the 2 hotel properties, Courtyard, which will have a banquet hall as kind of your traditional hotel stay, and then the Residence Inn, both Marriott brands, both very reputable Marriott brands. So, and both will be constructed at the same time, so one may open before the other, and they might be finishing up the interior of, let's say, like the Residence Inn. But for the most part, the sites are kind of interconnected, as we'll get into, so it'll all kind of be constructed at the same time in terms of the exterior of the site, the parking, the access, and all of that. There are some variations on this. I won't get into them all right now, but we have about 9 variations here. As I kind of walk through the different sections of what their approval entails, I'll kind of talk about each one of those, and then if you guys have any discussion on that, we can get into it later when we kind of talk about the open items. So with this proposal, there's a plat of subdivision. Currently, there's 2 existing lots out there. It basically divides them both equally, kind of horizontally. It's just 2 parcels stacked on top of each other. So this will basically redesign those lots that'll fit the 2 parcels. There's also appropriate easements on this plat for cross-access between the parcels to adjoining vacant parcels and cross-parking between these parcels, as well as utility easements. So all that's platted in the final plat of subdivision. The lots are kind of an odd shape, but so some of the design is typically you'd have 2 lots with 2 public frontages. This one's relatively unique because they had 2 large hotels they're trying to fit onto this site, and there's an existing wetland out there as well. Wetlands can't really be developed without pretty significant wetland credits and redevelopment of them. That's fairly costly. So for right now, they're working around the wetland that's on this parcel, and just doing cross-access easements between the 2 parcels. the property lines also kind of evenly divide the parking, the access aisles, and then the detention on site. So, while there might kind of be an HOA or a POA out here at some point in the future, if these are owned separately, whatever those requirements are can kind of change, so they kind of wanted to divide the wetlands, the parking, even though there'll be easements over them. In terms of maintenance, this will kind of ensure that everything's maintained equally between the two sites. Kind of lastly with that plat is they kind of have an idea to maybe possibly mitigate the wetland in the future, and then potentially break off a third lot that could be used for like a restaurant or an office use. So that's why kind of that large portion on the south of this site's not being developed with this project, but in the future they could mitigate those wetlands, fill it in and follow the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers requirements, and then it could potentially be buildable. So they've at least set it up where that is attached to the courtyard lot and could be subdivided in the future. There are a few revisions, but we did get a revised plat of subdivision yesterday. So it appears like most of our comments were addressed on that, but we haven't done really a full review on it yet, in terms of adding the public utility easements, the cross parking language, and a few other things. So they did resubmit kind of some plans, and I'll go through those here. I have some of them on the screen, but you guys didn't get the packets. And then we can show you what they kind of addressed in those. There's still some stuff they didn't address. But then by public hearing, we'll be able to resend those out to you. We'll be able to have fully reviewed them. The annexation, so they'll be pursuing annexation with the village board. That's likely to go to the community development committee, either the next, I believe it'll be at the next one, or soon thereafter. So while the plan commission doesn't specifically review annexations, you guys do kind of review, and someone's proposing to annex, what zoning district kind of do they fit in, and does that work with the surrounding area? So the proposed annexation will be it's an 8.7 acre lot, and then it's a total 9.15 acres that they're annexing. That includes that adjacent right-of-way parcel. There's kind of two possibilities in terms of the zoning. So there's for a hotel use, that allow for a hotel use, and that's the B3, which is our general business and commercial district, and then the ORI zoning district. We pursued the petitioner is pursuing the B3 zoning district, kind of as to be cohesive with the existing hotels that are out there that are in the B3 district, as well as the LaGrange Road parcels that are vacant or B3. So I'm kind of looking to extend that and not necessarily be an office in an industrial type site. They thought B3 kind of works the best there, but we've kind of left that open to discussion. If you kind of look at the zoning map, it looks like you should plug in an ORI zoning district there, but in reality, this area has kind of transitioned to be a little more commercial since the development, an expansion along I-80 and along LaGrange Road, with 183rd going through there as well. So the comprehensive plan, which was approved in 2000, so that was 20 years ago, shows this as ORI, but that was a time when 183rd didn't really go through. Again, LaGrange was only kind of a 4-lane road. So some things have changed out there since our last comprehensive plan, and we think B3 is kind of the maybe the best option to kind of extend the area that's adjacent on the east side of LaGrange Road. So, but we've left that open to discussion as well, if you guys have any input on that. There's a minimum 5-acre lot size requirement for any hotel to be a permitted use, so there is a variation on that. That was kind of put in place to promote full-service hotels uh, to be constructed instead of kind of the partial service or budget hotels that were being developed near Harlem and 193rd, so they wanted to kind of push it. They did that by putting that 5-acre limit, but yet the 5-acre limit in terms of the industry doesn't really mean anything. So with this proposal, they're under 5 acres on the Residence Inn lot. Yet they have basically a full-service hotel that they're proposing from a very reputable brand, a good product there. So 5 acres doesn't really mean anything. The courtyard's on above 5 acres, but that wouldn't be the case if they do break off kind of that third lot eventually. They would need to get a variance at the same time they did that plat. So again, so both those hotels can end up being on lots less than 5 acres. But I think the intent of what that requirement's for is being met here. The structure size is the B3 limits kind of to 3 stories, 35 feet in height, and that's because sometimes B3 can, I think, be around residential, and we kind of want to be cognizant of what the heights look like. These will be 4 stories, and the heights range a little bit, but they're right around 55 feet between the 2 structures, so they're asking for a variance for that to go a story higher, and then about 20 feet higher than what our typical requirements are. We have various properties throughout the village in B3 that are above 3 stories and above 35 feet. And we just kind of look at what's the surrounding uses, does it fit in with that? I also think it's important to kind of note that 3 stories has been typical for a very long time because of construction standards. So up until maybe the last round of building code updates, you could really only go 3 stories with wood frame construction. So just recently, can you even go 4 stories? Before, you'd have to start using steel, and it gets a little less economical for people. So it's more common to kind of see 4-story hotels now because of the way the construction industry and then building standards have gone. So it may be something we want to revisit in the future, but at least it puts some kind of limit where you guys can look at what's the surrounding area, does this height limit work with that? So you don't get a 50-story building or something like that would be out of scale. Lastly is the urban design overlay district. Again, walkability, urbanized look. There's 3 variations that they're pursuing through there. So it's the reduced front yard setback, which it seems a lot since it ranges to almost 200 feet, but that's basically based on the design of these 2 lots. Is you don't have, for the Residence Inn property, you don't kind of have that true front yard. You don't kind of have what's a true front yard on that one. So technically, the front of that hotel is considered the front yard, but yet they have the detention pond, and just kind of the lot setup is very unique between these with the shared access easement. So the courtyard meets that requirement, but the Residence Inn has that range from 42 to 200 feet. The other one is to permit parking in the front yard. Again, it's kind of based on that, is regardless of what you call the front yard, something has to be the front yard for Residence Inn. There's going to be parking there. So it's just a pretty unique setup there, again, without specific lot frontage. And then the 2 curb cuts on the courtyard site is, again, just kind of a result of the lot setup here in the large buildings, that there really wasn't another way for them to position the lots with the wetlands and be able to fit 2 hotels in there. So there's 2 curb cuts for the 2 lots, but the 2 curb cuts are on the same lot. So it doesn't specifically meet those requirements, but I think a lot of the intent of this code was met with the walkability, with the courtyard being pushed closest to the street side frontage, and then just kind of the interconnectivity between the 2 sites. From the site plan perspective, again, we've already kind of talked about the unique lot design, shared access between the two, so you basically drive through the courtyard to get to the residence in site. There'll be cross parking as well, just because once you're on the site, you don't see property lines. So going forward, if these two are owned separately, they have cross parking, so there's not any disputes or issues between the two. If there's two different property owners. Site circulation-wise, the main entrance is the one further south on White Eagle Drive that'll have a sign. It's also where you access kind of the front drop-off area of both hotels. Staff's kind of suggested that maybe this entrance be designed with a boulevard in it. So in the plans you guys received, it didn't really have a boulevard. It looked similar to the entrance that's for this north on White Eagle Drive. They did submit some revised plans to us today that show kind of that boulevarded entrance, a shared monument sign in the kind of island that'll be there, that I think will give it a little bit more appeal to being a main entrance, and kind of attract people to go in there, so. Yeah, so here's the revised plans on the PowerPoint that kind of shows where that boulevard goes to the property line. And then instead of doing kind of the two signs that are flagging the entrance, which have some issues with them that I'll get into later, they've now proposed kind of a shared monument sign in the middle. So I think that'll be a little bit more attractive main entrance that'll draw people to enter there. We also have an open item just to revise the plans with kind of traffic control signage and striping. So some of the entrances to the hotels are like one-way entrances, so we want to make sure they have those delineated right, as well as stop signs in the right location, things like that. So I'll just have them revise the sign to kind of add that traffic control signage into it. The drive aisle widths are something that just with all of this combined, that they kind of ran out of some room with between the detention, the two hotels. So some of the lot widths are at 24 feet. From a staff perspective, we're relatively fine with that. That's pretty standard across most other municipalities. Our fire department's fine with it as long as fire trucks can circulate kind of freely through the site. They're not really in opposition of it, so it really comes down to the turning templates show that a fire engine can circulate everywhere they need to get on this site. So they've been okay with it. We did have them revise that main entrance with the boulevarded entrance has now been expanded to 26 feet. We kind of wanted that to be a little bit wider just because there could be a lot of traffic going in and out of that drive aisle. And then you have adjacent parking spaces, so that 2 feet gives you a little bit extra space on that main drive aisle. So we've left it open for discussion on the variation for the drive aisle width, but we also were just recommending again that drive aisle be expanded. It looks like they've revised that, so they've certainly agreed to it, and we'll look at it when we have a chance to review these plans and get back to you by the public hearing. Lastly, sidewalks. So they have sidewalks going throughout the site, ranging from 5 feet to 7 feet. So if there's parking that kind of abuts the sidewalk, it becomes 7 feet. So that way it allows for bumper overhang. You still have the 5-foot walkway. It's still ADA compliant, even if someone pulls all the way up to the sidewalk. They've also added public sidewalks, which are 6 feet in width, I believe, along White Eagle Drive. So it's kind of floating out there because this is currently in a fairly undeveloped area. But as it develops, we want this to have interconnected sidewalks. And we see some other development happening out there in the near future. So hopefully all these hotels can walk to different places as they develop. So they just have White Eagle Drive. They don't have any frontage on 183rd. Which will be when that lot develops, they'll do the sidewalks there. So we have there's a basketball court on the Residence Inn site that we kind of wanted to bring up. It's a 42-foot by 50-foot, so kind of like a half-court basketball court that they're proposing kind of in the front of the Residence Inn. We're not against basketball, but it's kind of an odd location stuck between the building, the parking lot, and the indoor pool, kind of first floor extension out. They proposed a wall that'll be on the first, that'll match the brick of the building, a 6 or 8 foot wall that'll be there in front, and then a chain link fence on the side of that. So from an appearance perspective, we kind of had some concerns about what this will look like. It'll block some of the windows on the first floor. It'll also look like there's a wall there, and that's kind of the frontage of this. The other part of it is that a typical basketball hoop's about 10 feet to the rim. So we don't really allow any fences or walls that are above 8 feet. And that kind of limits, it's highly likely you're gonna have basketballs that'll bounce out of whatever this enclosure is. And it's kind of near parking, sidewalks, and other things, so we had some kind of concerns about that, as well as the architecture. So we do have on the lowest corner on the PowerPoint and then in your packets, a picture of one that's in Bolingbrook at a Residence Inn. That's a little bit smaller. It also has more room out there compared to ours, extending towards the parking lot. So it can be done. This is a little bit of a tighter spot again, and I think it's a little bit bigger court. So we've kind of proposed if there's some other option that they can do out there. I think through Marriott's Residence Inn brand, they like to see an outdoor activity, some kind of active activity. So if they can find maybe something else that doesn't have bouncing balls that'll go outside of it, that would be preferred. I think they've said they'll talk with Marriott and just kind of see, do they have something else that they'd like to see out here, or are they okay with taking the basketball court away? But we thought we'd leave that open for discussion as how does that work in that kind of confined space? And how does that look with a wall and a chain link fence in the front yard? So, there's 2 dumpster enclosures proposed at the back of each of these buildings. They match the brick that's kind of utilized for each of the buildings. All masonry trash enclosures. Engineering side, we'll note that the kind of overall site engineering is just preliminary at this point. They're still likely to have revisions for our village engineer, MWRD, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So part of the parcel is developing a small portion of the wetland. We'll call it the finger coming off the wetland, where the south part of the Residence Inn parking lot kind of develops it. So they'll be reviewing this. I believe they have the permit in to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That we're hopeful that just because it's a small portion, it's not the main part of the floodplain, that it's something that we can easily move forward with and develop. MWRD and our village engineer as well. We've been working to get utilities to this site, so that's kind of been in motion. I think with most of that tied down in terms of the route. We're gonna route utilities here, and then how they'll be routed through the site. But all of that hasn't been kind of finally engineered. So we will have kind of a condition on all of this that it's subject to these engineering approvals, for final approvals through those agencies. So. Landscaping wise, it's a heavily landscaped site. It's very, very close to our code, but there are some deficiencies left in this. We have kind of the full breakdown in your, in the staff report. We kind of have 3 suggestions that between staff and our consultant have kind of come up with, and that includes a couple, adding the additional islands and buffer yards at the driveway entrances. They have done that. on the revised plans, they've lost four or six parking spot. So, yeah, that's wrong. They actually lost 6 parking spots out of adding those. Kind of extended driveway entrances there at the front. So that meets our landscape code in the buffer yard. But it does detract 6 parking spaces now. So it does actually would kick in a parking variance as well. Fairly minor. I'll get into the amount of parking. They have cross parking out there as well. But they would meet that portion of the landscape code. It also kind of helps with just beautifying the entrances as well, so. Our second recommendation with landscaping was to add canopy trees. There's kind of 2 islands on the interior of this that have enough room to add trees that they don't currently propose. Can't see them in this, but they have green circles on them, so we'll forward those to them. Where right now they kind of have landscaping in them, but not trees, so. They're short 2 canopy trees on the interior, and then that would put them at full capacity for the interior trees. We've also looked at, with the basketball court or whatever outdoor activity they have, if they can try and screen that with some kind of shrubs year-round that would block kind of some of the noise and some of the views from that area. So just with it being in front of the building, we'd like to kind of have that be a little more private. So there are other deficiencies. I'll say the biggest one is interior landscaping, which are typically done with kind of parking islands. Parking lot islands. To get this though, I believe they need 30, or 24 stalls would have to be converted to actual landscape islands. So that's a lot of parking. This has been tough for other hotels and commercial properties to meet that don't have big expanses of parking because they can't kind of put in the long strip of landscaping in their parking stalls. So they've come close, but they're not quite there. But if there is some exchange that you guys are interested in, that, okay, we want to see a few more trees out there, but we're willing to take the loss in parking stalls, I think they'd be open to that. Sometimes we overpark places to make sure we have enough parking stalls, so if you guys would like to see maybe a little more greenery, you can always convert parking stalls to be those landscape islands. So we've left that as an open item for you guys, if you have any suggestions on that. Architecturally, we have the courtyard's a little more of a modern design, a little bit boxy, kind of hard edges. Residence Inn looks a little more apartment-y, homey, which is kind of what they're going for there with the extended stay look. The material-wise, the masonry code for structures exceeding 80,000 square feet would typically require that 25% of each facade is either face brick or decorative stone, and then the rest of it has to be masonry, but doesn't have to be face brick or masonry products. Kind of with our new architectural standards though, and with this coming in as an annexation, we did request that the petitioner get closer to 50% total brick on these properties. They're large commercial properties that are asking for variances for height. They're gonna be visual and they're gonna be seen, so we wanted to kind of push, could they get more on the brick? They have met those, the kind of minimum 50% on the brick. However, they're still short, basically the remaining portion is not an approved masonry product, so. And the Residence Inn is fiber cement board. The most common is hardy board, is what most people know it as, is used for the siding on the Residence Inn. That is 43% of the Residence Inn. And then for the courtyard, their alternative was originally stucco, and they've proposed, with the revised plans I got today, they're they're proposing hardy siding on that. I'll leave that up to discussion and debate. I'm not sure if I like necessarily the long siding. They make kind of hardy or fiber cement board panels that I think maybe would give them the look they were originally going for. Our issue is more with the stucco itself, not being a very durable, high-quality product. And I think they were trying to use fiber cement board, but maybe there's a different product out there that could be utilized there for the material. Those are variances to use something that's non-masonry. Traditionally, we've been okay with some higher amount of fiber cement board as a durable material that's kind of high quality. But we'll leave that kind of up to you guys. We have the new architectural standards in here too, that you guys might want to review in terms of what, there's not too much immediately surrounding it, but kind of picture what you want to see in that corridor. The two hotels that are out there are predominantly brick, and very highly visible. So this is going to be related to those. It's also kind of going to set the tone to what you'll see out there. So, lastly is the just general architectural design. These have kind of been picked as the overall designs are kind of the standard corporate designs. Most hotels kind of have their standard architectural plans and designs that they use. So both the Residence Inn and Courtyard, these kind of same models, the base models have been developed elsewhere. The main issue we kind of have is with the Courtyard's design, which is fairly boxy. There's some concern with just kind of the lack of the articulation in the facade that's there. It's fairly flat in the front and on the back. There's really only kind of two types of materials throughout the property. So they have kind of from what their original plan is, they have worked. They've added some windows on the sides. They've added some additional brick above the first floor. So they've worked on that a little bit. They've added a little bit of articulation, but we still think that there's something that could be done there to kind of make the facade look a little better. An example that we did find was there was a Courtyard outside of Kansas City. That's a recent one that was built. Has a little more windows. They utilized kind of where you have the fire escapes. They utilized windows and glass there to kind of accentuate the corners. The main entrance also kind of has some brick in it as well to break up the two parts of the facade. So there's kind of some things here that they may be able to use to kind of make what they propose maybe a little better. So we've left that open to discussion. Architecture is always hard because it's in the eye of the beholder. Some people like it, some people don't, but we're hopeful maybe we can get a little bit more out of the Courtyard, some kind of capping, something that gives it articulation and visual interest. So. Signage, so the wall signs are generally in conformance with our zoning code requirements. The size, location, and numbers are all there. The ground signs are, so I assume those will be revised now, coming with the next proposal. So those were designed to mirror each other and kind of flag the entrance, but now I believe they're gonna go with a kind of shared monument sign that'll be in the center island. So we'll probably see a revised one there. There was a variation for the setbacks, which they may still need for that new sign. But the reduced setback in that center island, it kind of takes away some of the issues we have with visibility thing around it and around the corners. We typically want to see them set back at least 5 feet if they are going to ask for the variance. So we'll see what they kind of propose for that new sign at the public hearing, but hopefully they at least meet that 5-foot setback. Lastly is there'll be an off-site sign, just with the way, again, this is laid out with the shared lots and that shared frontage along White Eagle. Typically, we don't allow for off-site signage, but the annexation agreement's gonna basically allow for it, and then there'll be a variance here as well. That'll allow the residents in to have a sign on the courtyard property. There'll be a signage easement with the plat as well. That'll have to be revised if they do the shared sign. Right now, it's just covering the residents in sign that's on the courtyard lot. So now it'll kind of be over the one sign. And it basically will guarantee that the residents in lot always has ability to get on that sign. And they have a certain portion dedicated to them. Can also spell out, maintenance costs, things like that going forward. Since right now we have one developer proposing these two hotels, but going forward, they could be two separate owners out there. Parking wise, so they were basically specifically meeting it for both the courtyard and the residents in. The courtyard, again, will now have a reduction of 6 parking spaces. If you guys decide you want more interior parking landscaping, that could be a little bit higher. But between the two of them, there is 259 parking stalls. So there's shared parking, which I think also helps alleviate some of the concerns between the two properties. If one's busy and the other one's not, they'll share parking spaces. Hotels also rarely operate at 100% capacity, so that's built into their pro forma and how they operate these is they're usually not operating 100%. And we have one parking space per room, so every room can have someone drive there, but rarely does that happen. Or people drive together on a road trip and get separate rooms. So it's there, it's a requirement, but if you look at most of our hotels, if you look at the Holiday Inn parking lot, it's empty a large percentage of the time. The other part of the parking counts, I think that's important, is that we also require them to have additional parking stalls for the maximum number of employees. The maximum employees on site are usually there in the middle of the day, though, when they're changing over rooms, which is also the same time when there's the least amount of customers on the property. So while we kind of require those parking spaces, I think there is some room there for flexibility with the way they've kind of built these to be shared parking lots. And the number of parking stalls total also kind of allows for some additional flexibility. So on the public hearing, they'll have that basically a 6 parking stall variation added to this. Lastly is lighting. So we have the new lighting ordinance. They're in full compliance with that. So they're all kind of full cutoff, downcast lighting stall or lighting fixtures. So they have the parking lot lighting, lights that are mounted at 25 feet in height. They also have bollard lights that light up the walkways and the entrances. They even have walkway lights, I believe, on the courtyard, or step lights that are actually built into the steps. So they've lit it fairly well, and kind of taken, the areas that you're gonna walk around, they kind of have more pedestrian level lighting. It kind of limited the parking lot, tall lighting to parking areas to kind of illuminate those. So, but fully in compliance in terms of the lighting levels that we have spelled out in our code, so. Again, that was a lot of talking, so sorry, but we got through everything. So I'll send it back to you guys to kind of talk about the open items or any questions, or if the petitioner has anything to.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks, staff, for that report. Does the petitioner have anything to say or make a presentation at this time? And if you can just introduce yourselves as well.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Thompson with Mahoney Silverman and Cross, and I represent Top Hospitality LLC. This is Chris Patel,
Chris Patel, developer.
We haven't done that with any
and
of
we
them.
have our engineer
We
Bill
haven't done that
Zaluski
with-
here as well to answer any questions that you have. We're really excited about this project. We think it's going to be a great addition to the village, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding the plans.
Okay, thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate your time. So, Commission, at this time, do you have any comments regarding the open items? I'll start with Commissioner Vic.
Oh, don't start here.
Okay,
A lot of open items, that's why I'm just kind of saying that.
I'll go to the other side. Commissioner
right.
Manny, if you have any comments on any of the open items
Worked out
that
good.
staff has presented today?
And let me just get on the one sheet that has the summary of the open items. 1 second, please.
On page 14 of the staff report.
Yeah, here it is. Okay, I was just wondering, or at least for staff, originally the drawings were specifying stucco, but that has, so the design has been revised to show more of a hardy board, cementitious. My question is, stucco, I believe, I mean, in my opinion, I think that's a a durable material versus ephes, which is just really foam and with the cementitious, layers. Architecturally, I think, the building looks, nice, again, it is a prototype, and then obviously when it gets constructed in other villages or cities, it does get, tweaked a little, but, I think, design-wise, it's looks good.
Any other additional comments?
Yeah,
Commissioner
I
Manny?
think, that's all my
Okay.
comments.
Commissioner Gatto?
So, can you go back to the Kansas City building?
Sure.
So I like the design of the Kansas City building better, I think, than the design that we have. I think that just the whole structure of it looks better to me. If we could get something close to this, I think I would personally be happier. I also, the basketball, where is that on the big, is it in the back corner?
It's in the, it's on,
That-
so if you're
on
looking
the-
at the residence end,
Okay,
it's on the
I see it.
northwest side of that building, tucked,
Right by the parking spots.
yes, yeah, between where the building kind of has an L.
The big gray square.
The Yeah.
Yeah.
Square
Okay.
there? Okay.
And there's nowhere else to put that on the lot?
I guess the question is it really needed? I mean, is there a better functionality for that space than a basketball court? It just seems out of place, in my opinion, a little bit, like, if you put down the wall and put like an open space, that, I think you said, one of the open spaces you have is like an open outdoor lounge area at part of the restaurant, was it? So, or something similar to that, to where it's like, around here, people like bags and other types of, games like that, even if it's just more of an open area for guests to get together and you rent bags or some other type of, activities that can be done there, it just, I do a lot of road trips, I stay at a lot of hotels, a lot of times, and, over the years, basketball courts get run down, if you're not on top of that maintenance-wise. I'm not sure if you guys consider, I know you guys do, I see that you've done it in other places, Bolingbrook was one of the examples. I just know it takes a lot of upkeep to keep on top of it, so it just kind of, to me, stuck out like a sore thumb.
Mhm.
It just didn't fit the character of that, of your hotel. I'd just be honest, like, it'd just be, if I'm driving up, that would just be odd to me. But I think there's a possibility, I'd love to continue the discussion of, maybe opening that up to your guests, or if there's I don't know if it addresses landscaping issues that could be utilized. Let's figure that out. I'm with you on that, Commissioner Gatto.
Yep.
Lawn bowling was another suggestion, something that would.
Bocce ball court, I mean,
Bocce
Yeah,
ball.
bocce
I know there's some, I know the brand's trying, I get what they're trying to do, and
Oh,
that's.
I
an
understood the-
extended
the
stay,
intent,
so
yes.
you want, okay, is there
Um,
something active you can do, so, but we were thinking bocce ball, golf, shuffleboard, something. But
Uh,
yeah,
I-
something like that.
A quick question for the petitioner. Do you guys have this, like, court at other hotels, and what is the success? Because one of the things brought up in the staff report was the nuisance aspect hitting cars, but it could also hit a pedestrian. Think of a old lady walking on the sidewalk, all of a sudden a ball comes at her. So I think that portion, that aspect of that, I don't know. If you have some that are fine and they work great, then I'd like to hear how you've been able to get around it. The other, the only other possibility, if you like the basketball court, I was wondering if you could put, like, trees that have kind of an umbrella on that, like between the skinny, but between the sidewalk and that, so that if the ball does go out of the cage, the 8-foot fence, it'll hit the tree and it'll at least be a buffer zone, so it doesn't hit somebody. But I also think there could probably be nuisance in terms of noise. You're on the first floor, second floor, you're trying to get some sleep, you have the window cracked and you hear sneakers and basketball going on.
If I'm in those rooms, I'm not gonna wanna look at a basketball court, if I'm staying there.
I'm not gonna
Um,
listen to
uh,
it, yeah.
It's just, from personal experience, we've just had those issues.
It is a very grand standard.
Okay.
We will talk to Marriott, see if maybe there's alternative use for it,
Mhm.
and see what else we can get as a physical activity on site. We do have it in a different property, to be honest, it rarely gets used.
Hmm.
But we can definitely entertain the
Uh,
idea.
We're saving
Another
money.
option for you might be, because I saw that at least one of them is gonna be a pet-friendly, pet-acceptable. It's like maybe dovetail onto that aspect of something to help with that aspect of your hotel to be more pet-friendly. I think that would be a very
Yeah.
good sell possibility as
idea.
well.
Yeah.
And I'll also, I'll dovetail on your, what's the cost, the example you guys found from Kansas, in the design, the architecture, what would be the cost difference between the design that you presented and the one like the one in Kansas? There's gotta be a cost difference.
Significantly.
And that's why, we're asking the question.
Yes, so if you ever notice the older Hyatt places, all used to have a lot of glass in the front. Now if you look at the new Hyatt places, it's all stone or ephes or some type of concrete floor. That's because the glass is very expensive if you put it.
Is just the initial cost prohibitive, or is it the upkeep in the HVAC? Is there, I mean, do you have more efficiencies with the glass or with the solid?
It's with the design, the engineering, and the cost of materials. And a lot of owners have now realized that there is no return on investment.
Even though the aesthetics make the attractiveness, like if I'm driving, I'm like, I'd like that, it's like, the aesthetics in my eyes as a person who travels, like, I think I wanna stay there, try it out. So, I mean, it's
Modern, it looks clean, like glass and square and everything.
I mean, the design of the court, and no offense, but it looks like it was a revised 1970s architectural presentation. And I know that because there's actually a similar hotel in that type of design down in Springfield, Illinois, and it takes a toll just because it looks like it's from the 1970s. So,
That's part of what our concern is how it ages, and if there's some way to brighten it up, make it a little more traditional, or just bring in changes in the facade articulation or different materials. More than two materials on the building can go a long way.
I mean, even
We had the same
even
issue.
even if you were able to differentiate the roof line height more like the Residence Inn to make it more match a bit more, even that would, I think, be an improvement.
Yeah, and we had this issue with the Holiday Inn,
Yep.
not too far back too, where we kind of had this monotonous, flatter facade, and they changed, they couldn't do as much with the articulation, but they were able to change kind of different materials of brick between it, that kind of brightened it up a little bit more, so. Even if it's not the windows, if they could do something like that, I know they're still trying to go with the.
And we really don't want to dramatically increase your costs. We do want you here. We're just trying to marry the two.
Commissioner Gatto, any more comments?
No, that's all I have.
Okay. We'll move on. Any more comments, Commissioner
I got,
Fielder?
On the parking, everything I saw looked like it was for, just your normal, up to a big SUV. Do you have any designated areas for like buses? Like, because if you have school trips that like they come for competitions and stuff, sometimes they bring buses. I really didn't see it in your parking schematics. and, there's a lot of truck traffic, truck drivers that might stop through. How do, your traffic flow pattern, it seems like it's just a one-way and a U. So between possible truck traffic, your delivery trucks, the garbage trucks, how does that, how does your parking lot not get jammed up from time to time? I'm not sure if that was taken into consideration, because the layout's funky because of the wetlands, I understand that. But there might be something to talk about in terms of a better way to do your larger traffic flow that's that's likely going to occur. It may not be as frequent as just your normal passenger, mom and dad with the family traffic. But it's something that we should probably also look at. And it might help solve some of the landscaping issues down the road.
And piggybacking on the traffic, it appeared to me, just from the staff report, that the flow is from the south curb cut to the north. But then introducing the courtyard with the sign, you have it divided, it looks like an ingress egress, it looks like an entrance exit. But yet you still only have that 26-foot, and then it goes to 24-foot. Is that, I just want to make sure that the traffic flow is only supposed to be south to, from the south and then exit the north.
They'll both be two ways.
Okay,
So both that south entrance and the north entrance are
Okay.
both two ways, but this will primarily be the kind of main entrance because it leads to the two entrances to the hotels, but you'll
Okay.
be able to exit out it as well. So they're both two-way entrance. Every aisle throughout this site is a two-way aisle,
okay,
so.
okay, that's good.
We do need a revised auto turn, though, with this new entrance, and that's the main concern that fire has, and then us as well, as you have delivery trucks and other. We need to make sure it can make the turn in and circulate through the site. So they gave us the revised plan, but I don't think we got the revised auto turning. So we'll need that before the public hearing. But there isn't any truck parking or bus parking that's dedicated on the site. I don't think we have that in any of our hotels, but could they take up a few parking stall? I mean, if you have a whole bus
Right.
full of kids, then maybe you'd
They'll just
probably
park
have
across it.
multiple rooms, and you'd probably end up taking 4 or 5 stalls up for your bus. So, I don't know if they have a better answer to that than what I'm.
They probably just go to the
than
south
that,
side.
But, we do need that revised auto turn template, just to kind of make sure everything can circulate through the site.
Okay.
But cars will be able to enter on that north one, so let's say you already checked in and you're returning back to the hotel, you can go park there. They have like a banquet rental room in there as well, that kind of has its own little separate entrance on the north side of the courtyard, so you could park enter there and park over there for that.
Any more comments,
Um,
Commissioner Fielder?
I think what's, I don't know if I read it, in the detention pond, you'll actually have water in that detention pond. Are you gonna have a fountain in there or anything, to circulate the water? The only other thing I worry about is stagnant water during the summertime. I just didn't know if that was, something that could be discussed in the future as well.
It can be discussed, we can look into it.
Is it, I thought it was dry, is it a dry? Oh, okay.
Can you stand up here at the, by the microphone to talk?
In one of the renderings, I saw
So-
water in there, and that's why I asked
So
the
I think
question.
it's kind of is it like a naturalized bottom on there, kind of like.
Okay.
It helps with the maintenance, so you don't have to cut it all the time, but I don't believe it's actually gonna be filled with water all the time.
Right, it's not going to be a pond, so to speak, with water in it that's holding it with fountains. It's gonna be a wetland bottom. It seems like we're all moving that way for being more green, a way to, suck up as much water as possible before it discharges out of the site, and it's more naturalized.
The other reason, because one of the renderings, there was like water right there, and that's why I asked the question, because one of the biggest things, especially in the summertime, is you have stagnant water, you get mosquitoes, and everybody's gonna have a miserable time.
Yes.
And so, I just wanted that clarification, so I appreciate that.
Some of those are rough while they're getting kind of established,
Yep.
but at least in this one, all this landscaping will have time to
Yep.
kind of mature by the time anything else develops around it, but
And I know one-
sometimes the first year or two of those take a little bit, so.
Yeah. I know one of the conceptual drawings, I think the very first one you led off with, Dan, it just showed the wetland and then green grass. I know there, I looked at the plan, so I know that there's a, you know, a detention pond, you know, but you wouldn't know it from there, right? You just see the wetland, but you'd have to imagine that blue to the north there, but, okay, fair. Thank you, Bill, for clarifying the wet bottom pond. Any more comments, Commissioner
That's all
Field?
at this time, so thank you very much.
Okay, Commissioner Aitchison.
I don't mean to be repetitive or piggyback on comments that have previously been made, but the two big things that caught my eye were the architecture of the courtyard. I do like the one, the design from Kansas better. I just feel that the one that you're proposing is outdated and cold. And the second is the basketball court. I just feel like there's a better use for that land. I don't know that fits.
Okay, good, Commissioner Aitchison. Commissioner Gaskell.
No, nothing at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Vick.
Just a couple of general comments, because a lot of the other stuff has been made. One, the height changes for this, I mean, definitely don't see a problem with them at all for that area. It's far enough away from any residences to the east there that it shouldn't be a concern, especially assuming at some point there'll be some other future development going around in some of the other parcels around there. And to the other side, I think that's, you know, like I said, not an issue at all. One problem that I'm just thinking about here is dealing with the parking situation, when we're talking about for the courtyard and the banquet, the separate banquet facility. Technically, it's part of it, of course, but it's talking about separate entrances and rental stuff, things like that. Is a lot of times, I mean, our hotels in this town do tend to be quite busy during the summer, especially with concert events, and many of them come very close to selling out. And then you add a banquet on top of this, and there's no really extra parking aside for that. And what kind of concern is that going to be, you know, when you have customers come back from, let's say, an event, and now they're coming here because there's a banquet and there's nowhere even relatively close to them. Maybe they have to go to the far side to park or the other side of residences. Just, that's one of my big concerns, because another hotel down the road from there, in Orland Park, they have a banquet hall attached, and they have provided extra parking for that by the look of that place that is in there. And I don't know the size of what we're talking about here. I didn't, in all honesty, because that part I'm not super concerned with. What size banquet room are we talking about? How many people?
5,000 square feet.
Okay.
Yeah, so fairly small, it's
Yeah,
not like
yes.
Georgia's banquet,
Yeah.
where it's.
So that would just be, I mean, that's probably one of the things here. Most of my other concerns have been addressed by other members of the commission here, so really, don't have any problems with this. The setbacks that were being talked about, the variances that they're looking for, especially with that front yard that faces, what was that, whatever. The main entrance road there, yeah. I mean, personally, the way this site is set up and because of how it is, I don't have an issue with any problems there. The landscape deficiencies, I wouldn't want to cut any more parking spots, any spots from this, because we are at the bare, what we are. I mean, it is being, by the development, by the pictures that we've seen, by the plans that we've seen, it is, pretty well, stuff that's being put in. I think there's pretty good coverage here going on, especially with growth over the years, and how that progresses. I don't have a lot of big problems in that area as well. So, other than that, I got nothing else.
Thank you, Commissioner Vick. And I do concur with Commissioner Vick on that. Do not eliminate 24 parking spots for a few more trees. I think the site, based on the conceptual models and also the landscaping plan, it's well shrouded around the perimeter. You're going to add the 2 in the middle. I think the juice isn't worth the squeeze for that. I would keep the 24 parking spaces, just as Commissioner Vick said about you have a banquet, it throws off the parking, and then you'll have a lot of unhappy guests. I do have some other additional comments as well. I noticed the wetland on that, on the portion of the site, the The southern east or southeasternmost parking lot is, you guys mentioned, or I'm assuming going, it's jurisdictional, it looked like there was a wetland delineation. So I'm assuming you're going for a 404B permit to modify that. And I was just curious, because I saw in the staff report that potentially you may look after this thing's developed to mitigate the wetland after the fact. I think Dan had mentioned in this staff report, or at least alluded to that, and I know it does cost a heavy amount of money to modify any wetlands and going through that permitting process. How realistic is that potential future use? I'm just curious if any of you guys can comment on that.
As the development side, we really just don't know yet until we get these properties off the ground and see how everything stabilizes and how they perform.
Sure. Okay, fair enough, Chris, okay. Yeah, I agree, I just, in engineering, a lot of times, if there is something you're gonna develop, you typically would
Yeah,
wanna,
do it from day one.
day one, when you do the earthwork, right, topsoil stripping, and and then you're gonna do your earthwork excavation, and then, but I understand it's buku bucks to do that, so you wanna see how, test the waters, so to speak, before you go there, that's fine.
It's fairly expensive and tough, so that's where they did want to break it off originally, because of how hard it is to develop a wetland and how expensive it can be, and without knowing those numbers, that's why we have it looped in with the other lots, because otherwise, if you break that off, does it just stay a vacant
Right.
lot forever? So that's not good kind of planning and subdivision standards, so that's why we have that connected to the other lot. Someone's gonna own it, it's not just gonna sit in repetitive tax sales because no one wants to own a wetland, which eventually we usually end up owning. So this was kind of that way of connecting it to the lots, and if they can find a way, great, but sometimes it's hard to see that happening due to the cost of.
Right, and you get credit for the
Developing.
trees being around the wetland for your landscaping, so, that's the best of a probably dim situation with that. I do wanna segue to the height of the building. I know there's a 20 to 21 foot variance. I do agree with what Commissioner Vick said, though. It does seem to be in an area, you have to the southwest, you have hotels that are 3-story, and then the WLS tower. How high is that tower, Dan, do you know?
Hundreds.
Yeah,
Hundreds of feet.
about a 100-foot
Okay.
tower, I think, yeah.
Okay.
But to be fair, that was there before everything else was built around it, so it's like, I got the full history of it on accident, like, they moved there purposefully because they didn't like Cook County, and so they built out there before anything else, even the homes that were unincorporated were out there, but I think it's a few hundred feet.
Okay. And I just wanted to get a distance to, because looking at the map, it looks like it should be decently far away from that eastern subdivision, but do you know, either in terms of feet or how far that is?
Got those on it. I can look it up for the public hearing, but I'm not exactly sure what that footage,
Okay.
like the width of the
Yeah.
plan.
So what's the bottom? So that's 602, so I imagine it's at least 1,200 from
Okay.
homes to the east.
Okay, so,
Well, I guess
Quarter of a
because they're on
mile.
the east side, it's at least 600 feet then, I guess. It looks like it's equal distance, you know.
yeah, it looks
The
equidistant,
east-west dimension looks
so
the
600,
same.
yeah.
So it looks like they're at least 600 feet to
Okay.
the east of it.
Okay, and one thing that,
And they do cover all of the buffering on the site, so the actual exterior buffering on that site that fully meets the coverage, but it's just the interior landscaping where they're.
okay.
And the hope would be that something would develop between the two.
Right, yeah, I agree 100%. And one of the things that was brought up in one of the open items was the zoning, whether it be B3. A lot of the staff report heavily geared towards B3 versus the ORI. And I'll have to say, based on what you presented, to me, the ORI does seem to be a little bit more antiquated versus some of the development to the southwest. So I do think the B3 seemingly fits the businesses that are to come in with the hotels. I'm trying to see if, I do want to talk about the materials. That was something that was brought up. And I know you said you got new plans regarding the materials, so you guys are not gonna use stucco on the Residence Inn now? Has that been decided, or,
We are looking at the concrete panel,
okay,
but we should have samples in next week that we'd like
Okay.
to share with you guys.
okay. And the reason I bring this up is because Commissioner Manny, who is an architect, you have no problems with the stucco, right?
No, not at all. You know, just, you know, obviously, you know, it's, you know, you have, this wire lath, and then some additions is put on layers, and, you know, I never seen ever a problem with it. I've seen problems with ephes, which is foam, and, you know, that could get,
But-
you know,
In terms of durability and taking care of that stucco on the, because the building facade, a couple of the commissioners mentioned, it looks great for the Residence Inn. It really does. I do, you know, so if that,
no, in my opinion, I think the stucco is good, you know, versus like ephes, you know, so if, you know, having stucco proposed for this, you know, one of these, you know, hotels, I think it should be fine, you know?
okay, I'm not as familiar on the durability portion, but obviously staff has researched some of it to perhaps have an opinion in the opposite direction. So I would just recommend, Chris, pursuing that alternative material, and then perhaps when you bring the materials, we can see all the alternatives that you guys plan to potentially build with.
We're not anti-stucco, it's more, it hasn't traditionally been used in the village on commercial properties. It hasn't, because they're asking for a variance to substitute for masonry, it's, and I agree, it can be durable, it can be good. A lot of it depends on how it's installed.
Okay, well, there you go, yeah.
There's a lot of, you know,
Quality control issues that when you're building it would have to
so
be.
it's been one of those that it has not traditionally been used
Okay.
in the village on larger.
Well, I trust your research in terms
So-
of,
But it can be durable, it can be.
No,
durable.
right, I mean, it all depends too on the specification, how, you
Yes,
know,
yeah.
besides the actual drawings, you have,
So that's
you have the
been part of the
specification indicating
hardship.
how that should be installed.
And some of
you know.
that's with the fiber cement board too. I mean, if it's installed incorrectly, it's not gonna,
Right.
but if it gets installed correctly, traditionally, we've heard that that is kind of easier to maintain over the long period. But, yeah, there's a lot of specifics about the exact cut sheet, so. So they've looked at doing fiber cement, but it's up to them if they wanted to go back to the stucco, they can ask for the variance, but we'll do a little bit more research on it.
understood.
If they revise the design as we've asked them to do, maybe that's a counterbalance.
Yeah.
So,
Speaking of which, I know some revisions were made, the setback, you guys are going with that shared monument sign in the courtyard. I do like the look better versus being 1 foot off of the property. But do you guys know offhand, maybe Bill would know how, so far preliminary, I couldn't get an idea of the scale from how far that is off of White Eagle? What's the setback?
It's 5 feet off the right of way, the face
Okay,
of the sign.
oh, yeah, of the right of way of White Eagle Drive, okay. So it's not the 10 feet, but it's at least not right there at a knife's edge at 1 foot. I think it looks good, so I'm okay with that variance. And then I guess all the setbacks and whatnot will be put on the new plans, right? Okay.
And that's the visibility with where that sign's at now, even with the 5 feet, is better than the two signs right there on where you're looking for vehicles. This one, it won't be as much, blocking the sidewalk visibility, the vehicle visibility, so helps a little bit with it being in the middle.
Okay. With that, I have no more comments. So does anybody else on the commission have anything else to add since their initial comments?
No.
Okay, well, staff, can you review the open items that were requested, or give some direction on the request?
Yeah, I won't go through every single one, since a lot of them seem to be, they've either will have agreed to address them, or you guys have already kind of uniformly stated they're not the biggest ones. As you stated, revising the plans to include all the kind of structure and sign setbacks. They've already agreed to do the boulevard entrance, revising just against traffic control signage. The outdoor basketball court, it sounds like there's obvious concerns with that and how it'll work, so, and the petitioners agreed to kind of talk with Marriott, look into alternatives there. So I think that was one of the major ones. The non-masonry materials, it looks like they proposed fiber cement board siding on that, and then they'll look into, what the alternatives look like there. We can maybe get some different renderings and how they kind of, again, use that with the other open item, just in terms of the architectural design of the courtyard building. So maybe they can kind of mirror those together, use some different materials, and then also, hopefully those can tie into the architectural design. So those look kind of like the big three: the basketball court, the masonry, the non-masonry materials, and then the architectural design of the courtyard. Kind of look like the big three open items that are left for them to address. Everything else seems like they've either agreed to take care of it, or you guys are okay with it if it was like a variation request.
Okay, thank you, Dan. So Tiffany, Chris, and Bill, there will be a public hearing in this room on this item at March 5th, 2020, for the regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting, so please attend. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to item 2. The second item on the agenda this evening is a workshop for the Whistle Banquet Facility.
Well,
No,
it's the public hearings. Did you get the amended agenda?
I do have the amended agenda. Item 2 was the workshop first. Item 3 was the public hearing,
I'm sorry.
which was posted in error.
I apologize. I was thinking about Marriott. My mistake.
No
Sorry.
worries, no worries. I'll just reiterate, item 2, the second item on the agenda this evening is a workshop for the Whistle Banquet Facility at 7537 159th Street to consider recommending that the village board grant Stephanie Mikesell, on behalf of Whistle Events and Catering, a special use permit for a banquet facility located in the Brementown Mini Mall at 7537 159th Street in the B1 Neighborhood Shopping Zoning District. Staff, could you please make your presentation at this time?
Yes, thank you. This is a project, it's the first time we're looking for a request under our new text amendment for banquets. I believe most of you were here when we made an amendment to the zoning code for the banquet facilities. So this is the first time we'll be looking at this under all those new regulations and amendments. The applicants, Stephanie and Bobby Sanfilippo, are looking to create a banquet facility at 7537A West 159th Street. That's immediately adjacent to the Whistle Bar and Grill. Currently, they are operating a catering service there as under the same business license and same liquor license as the Whistle, but they would like to run a business independent of that, and therefore, per the code that we amended for standalone banquet facilities, they will need to have a special use because they are located in a B1 district. Just to be clear, because that was where I was getting mixed up, we did erroneously notice this for a public hearing. I don't know, it doesn't look like there's any public here for that. I just wanted to be full disclosure. The typical process is workshop and public hearing like we did with Marriott. So we'll operate this as a workshop, open the public hearing, table it till next time, and then go forward with that meeting at our next meeting. So the property is part of the Brementown Mini Mall that's located at 159th and 76th Avenue. A little bit of history of that area. The Brementown subdivision preceded the development of Brementown mini mall, which was built in 1973, so it's an older facility. Subsequent to that, and actually in 1974, the apartment complex immediately to the east was constructed. So like most B1s, they're surrounded by residential uses. The only difference is that they do have frontage on a fairly strong commercial corridor on 159th Street. The mall is comprised of 400 square feet. It has struggled over time in getting some occupancy. Certainly, the Whistle Bar and Grill was a good addition to the development. However, of the 12 tenant spaces we have available, there are 5 vacancies in the facility, in the building right now. 3 of them are part of the sort of the retail component, which is in the north and the west side, and 2 of them are in the professional office area on the south side. The bar and grill, the Whistle Sports Bar and Grill, they opened in June of 2017. They have 4,450 square feet and comprise about 16% of the total tenancy in the mall. Their facility has 128 seats with an occupancy of 166 people. With their success, as I mentioned, they wanted to expand into the event and catering business. I'll give you a little chronology of how that transpired. So just to refresh your memory, back in May, back in May, Mr. Filippo and Mrs. Weitzel approached the village about getting a liquor license for this business they wanted to open. They were unaware at that time that banquet facilities were not allowed in B1. Actually, they weren't allowed in any district in the village except the M1 and ORI. So they came in, unbeknownst to them, they wanted to set up a business in this mall. They were told that, they just can't do it. We don't have that ability in that district. And the only option they had was really to open up the business as part of the Whistle Sports Bar and Grill, which would require some sort of interconnection between the two, like a door. They had expressed to us that that's really not what they wanted to do. They really wanted to have an independent business. They met with planning staff, and we said, all we can do when something's not prohibited or not allowed, we can present a text amendment to the board and see how they feel about that. So that process began. In June of last year, we took it to the CD committee, sort of approached the whole concept. Most of you are familiar with that whole process. It was a fairly extensive review. We looked at other communities. We looked at our district. I would say probably the overwhelming issue was parking in the B1 districts, because B1 districts are our most limited business district, and they are closely associated with residential areas. And with all of our commercial properties, we don't want to see spillage of commercial uses onto our residents. We're here to protect our residents and the residential character of the neighborhood. So just as our ordinance requires on all commercial uses, you have to retain all your parking on your site. You can't spill over. Now, when you get into B3 and you get into these larger commercial districts like the Brookside Marketplace, you got to have flexibility, because what's not happening at TJ Maxx may pick up over at Ross Dress for Less or whatever. So you have a larger parking field that has a little bit more flexibility with it. But these sites, which are tighter, we have to be respectful of the neighborhood. So it was my project, so I remember it intimately. We were certainly willing to pursue a text amendment to try to accommodate Mr. Filippo and Mrs. Weitzel's request, but it had to go through a process. So the process went as I outlined here. We went to a CD committee, and actually the size that we had proposed to them, they reduced it. Staff had recommended a maximum size of 5,000 square feet for a banquet facility in a B1. They said, no, that's too big. You need to reduce it to 4,000. We proceeded through Plan Commission, through you people. It made its way up to the village board, and actually at the village board, they also expressed a lot of concerns about parking in the B1 district. So they actually requested that we change the parking requiremements. Through our research and so forth, we had recommended a 1 space per 100 square feet. They increased that to 1.5 parking spaces per 100 square feet. So you know, the sort of the overall concern was in these B1 districts, that's the one we need to be careful about, again, because of its proximity to residential property. But the text amendment was adopted. It was adopted in September. Meanwhile, the applicant certainly wanted to continue to pursue their new business venture. And they came in and submitted for an application to expand the Whistle Bar and Grill into the catering and event business. Submitted their applications. They were told they had to keep a doorway between the two because that's the only way they could operate was an expansion of the business. So that's what they did. The building permit was issued in September. In February, they actually got their occupancy permit. We did require the doorway. When we came upon the last inspection, the doorway wasn't there. We made it clear again, we have to have a doorway between the two. Has to operate under a Whistle Bar and Grill business license, has to operate under their liquor license. I believe they wanted to have separate businesses, and they still do. That's why they're before you now. But the only way to do that would be to go through this process. So that's why they're here before you today, because I think that's the direction they want to go. They want to close the door, make this a separate entity, operate as a separate Whistle Events and Catering rather than Whistle Sports Bar and Grill. And that requires a special use. So we got the application on February 11th, and that's why we're here today. Background on the property, we have surrounding zoning. The Star is the subject property, again, B1. To the east is the old Orland Creek Apartments, R6, multifamily. To the south is a single-family subdivision, is R4. To the west is R5, multifamily, and then fronting 159th is B3, general commercial business. Just to clarify again, this was in your staff report, the B1 district is purposely written to provide area for retail and service establishments to supply convenience and goods for the daily needs of residents living in the adjacent residential areas. The district is designed to encourage shopping center with planned off-street parking and loading, and to provide for existing individual to small groups of local stores. And so that's kind of the outline. This is really the only other B1 that's not on, I think all our other B1s are pretty much on 80th Avenue, and they're kind of tucked away more into neighborhoods. They are on commercial corridors, but certainly not one of the magnitude of 159th Street. So as part of the new text amendment, one of the things our old ordinance had, it never clearly defined what a banquet facility is. If you remember, we had a meeting hall, we had something else, I forget what it was called, meeting hall or something else. So we made clear, we wanted to make sure everyone understood what a true banquet facility was. I've got that definition up there for you. So it's a place for private events, you know, catering, birthday parties, anniversaries, and other similarities. It may or may not have a kitchen on site. They have remodeled the existing event space with a bar and a warming kitchen in there. That's what's there now. So they did supply, and it's in your application, their business plan, and as part of their business plan, they mentioned what they want to do is provide excellent food and service for everyone's catering and private party needs. Our target market will be catering and providing a party room to local business and residents. Is my understanding they don't intend on producing the food and catering there. They will be catering from the outside or from, I suspect, from the Whistle as well.
We'll only pay them.
Yeah, I'll let, when I get done, you could come up to the microphone. With all special uses, and we've encountered special uses all this time, the whole point of bringing it through a special use process is to give you an opportunity to kind of look at this from all different perspectives and consider if there are any unique circumstances that result from the proposed use. There are standards, and I have them listed here. You all know how those standards work. By law, what you are charged with doing is looking at the proposed use and evaluate its impact on the surrounding land uses. You have the right to impose conditions, if you will. They need to be specifically and uniquely attributable to the perceived impact of the property. For example, a daycare facility is somewhat similar in its parking situation or its episodic traffic patterns. When we look at daycares, we often look at the traffic flow. How does it impact, stacking and so forth? So that's why a daycare center, for example, would be a special use. So it's something that's not permitted by right. Banquet facilities are special uses in all districts, except for in B3 when it gets up to a certain size, which usually would command a standalone facility, not unlike the Nofels or some of those other ones. They are permitted by right. The standards that I've listed there for you, again, when we go into the public hearing, they have provided answers to those standards, and those are in your packet, and I encourage you to read their defense of the request so that they are giving you reasons on why they believe they meet the standards. Probably the two standards I encourage you to think about would be B, where we're just looking at making sure that this special use is not injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for purposes that are already permitted. In other words, the residential uses in the area are already permitted, they're not special uses. So we want to make sure that we don't substantially diminish or impair the property values of the neighborhood with the proposed use and any impact that the parking may have. And then number F was what I was mentioning, where the village board can impose conditions and restrictions on the special use if they want to improve it, that make sure that there is compliance to these standards, that again minimize any perceived impact that it may have in the general area. So I think in looking back and remembering what the testimony was when we were adopting this text amendment, and mainly what staff's concerns are, is parking in the area. Right now, we have, it's not showing up as well as I'd like it to, but there are 185 parking spaces. In general, the parking fields, you've got 54 spaces on the north, you've got 52 on the west, 51 on the east, so those are fairly, consistent, and then you have 28 on the south side. As I mentioned, there are, I think I listed this before. Yeah, in Bremen Town, we have 3 restaurants, including the Whistle Bar and Grill, 2 retailers, 1 service business, and then 1 professional office. There are, as I mentioned, 5 vacancies. 3 of those are located either on the north or the west side, and 2 vacancies on the south side, which are more related to the professional offices. Those could be medical offices, chiropractors, yoga studios. I guess was there before. So when you look at the count, and this is a little, I really need to make sure you understand how these parking counts go. We have a section in our code that sort of generically, when you're looking at a commercial structure and you don't know what's going in there, you'll look at a requirement of 1 space per 150 square feet. But if you know a restaurant's there, the count changes to 1 space per 3 seats plus maximum employees at any given time. And again, as I mentioned in there, and you've heard me be on my soapbox, parking is not a perfect science. It's very difficult. You go into any community, their parking ratios are all over the board. I think, Dan, you even mentioned, we certainly have seen a shift in society where we no longer want to over-park a property. We don't want to see these sea of parking spaces in front of a Kmart or a Walmart. But we also don't want to be impacting the neighborhood. So the perfect answer is somewhere in between the two. So you have restaurants that have a specific parking requirement, and then banquet facilities, as a result of the text amendment, we have a specific parking requirement for a banquet facility in the B1. And it was increased because the board was concerned about it. It's 1.5 parking spaces per every 100 square feet. So in this table, what I did, I took the total square footage of the mall, and I applied just that generic number of 1 per 150. That doesn't, that's actually sort of undercounts what's needed because it assumes there's no restaurants, no banquets or anything. If I do that, my parking requirement is 190. So we know it's, the requirement is really above that, but I'm just trying to give you a baseline. There's 185 parking spaces provided. So right off the bat, before we look at any kind of uses in the center, you have a deficiency of 5 parking spaces. That's not huge in terms of scale, but it is deficient. I guess the biggest concern is we have vacancies that we have no idea what they're going to be. So the Whistle Bar and Grill has 4,450 square feet. And what I did, I took, their architect gave me a floor sample of their tables and their seats. Again, that all can move around, they can put bigger tables in there, but I need to go by something. So the seating that they had, divided by 3, plus employees, came out to a requirement of 58 parking spaces. That constitutes about 32% of the total parking that is provided on that site. The events and catering, again, we have direction on that. They are 2,120. That again is 1.5 per 100, so they are required to have 32 parking spaces between the two of those. So just those 2 uses are 90 parking spaces that are required for those 2 uses. Then if I take the remaining square footage of the entire center, again, I'm not looking at the fact that there's a burrito in there, there's a Rosita pizza, I think, or something. That's 21,830 square feet. That results in a parking requirement of 146 spaces. So in total, you've got the 2 restaurant uses that are by code, you have the other tenants, which are a generic formula. You have 236 parking spaces that are required for that site. So you're starting out with a deficiency of 46 spaces on the site. Now we discussed this with the applicant, and when we met, I said, this is the one area you really need to think about. This is one area that you need to come prepared and make a defense. It's not unlike, I think all of you were here with Anytime Fitness came, remember that? So they're at the junction. They were in a B1, very, very similar. They were a 24-hour business. They were in a B1. We required a parking study of them, and mainly because it was immediately adjacent to homes, and it was a 24-hour business. So, Dan, that was your project. You required a parking study, and they provided you with a parking study. To date, he may have something more this evening, but I really don't have a parking study still, so I can't really give you much guidance in terms of, how this is performing. Plus, the events and catering has only been open for 2 weeks, I think 2 weekends, open Super Bowl weekend. He has some testimony I think he can give on how that worked out. I did ask our police, I mean, it's not their job to do parking studies, but I was trying to give you something. So I did ask our police department if they could run out there and do a quick count. I did provide that here. I'm even hesitant to do this because I don't know if I feel it's appropriate to have the police doing our parking studies, but I wanted to get some sense of what was going on. So you can see on a Friday night, that's probably their highest count of occupation of the center was at 8 o'clock. Is that, do I get the military time?
6
right?
o'clock.
8 o'clock?
At 6 o'clock. 1800.
Yeah, well, the highest one was
21
at
is
8.
9.
21 was 9 o'clock.
That's
Oh, 9 o'clock, okay, so great math skills. So that was 116, and that was for the entire facility. I know that Mr. Weitzel had given me some numbers, but he was only looking at the parking fields around his center. We really need to do a true count that looks at the entire center in terms of where the parking is and what the availability is. There's always opportunity for shared parking. If something is all breakfast uses and their uses are mainly at night. However, the banquet will, I suspect, unless they tell us otherwise, be open for lunch, baby showers, wedding showers. They do have a big brunch on Sundays that's very successful. So those are the main concerns that staff has, and in looking at the special use and making sure that we don't impact the neighborhood for their parking. So that's my only open item is really the parking. And the applicant is here, and he's welcome to come up to the microphone and make a presentation and provide any new information.
And if you could just state your name.
I'm Mark Mikesell, the owner of The Whistle, and my wife Stephanie.
Hi, Robert Sanfilippo. That's fine. We're loud. First, I'd like to thank Paula for getting us on the agenda very soon, very quickly. It was nice of her to do that. I would also like to thank the board for their time that you're donating to the village. I know it was a donation of time, and it's thank you for doing that. Mark, you want to go through the numbers?
Oh, yes, so, you know, and again, thanks Paula for, you know, all your feedback and help through this. I guess, you know, like you said, we opened The Whistle in 2017, on January or July 10th. We've been very successful, you know, obviously, it's been going very well. You know, Bobby and I have been talking about opening up a, you know, an events and catering facility, so she walked you through all that. I guess my first point would be, you know, we're already up and running as The Whistle. So when you look at a parking study, and I understand there's rules and regulations as a B1, and we got to get it moved, and it's an entire process, but we're still going to be operating as The Whistle, whether we operate as The Whistle Events and Catering or just The Whistle. Well, you see what I'm saying? So that's not going to be going away, you know, so to speak, because you know, we can operate as The Whistle. So, you know, and I'd ask to consider just a few points. You know, the chiropractor, I mean, I'm there every day. The chiropractor, you know, next door has 4 or 5 people, you know, there at a time. The liquor store, you know, has 3 or 4 people there at a time. The Mexican restaurant, you know, they're, you know, in and out. They might have 10 to 12, you know, cars there, sometimes more, sometimes less. You know, the grocery store, you know, same thing, 3 or 4. The Royal Cuts, they have 2 or 3 people getting their hair cut. Our lunch crowd, as you know, we'd like to grow it, but you know, as Paula mentioned, we will be doing, you know, hopefully as the event center grows, you know, some, you know, funeral luncheons, bridal showers, stuff like that. But you know, we're not so busy in the, you know, from 11 to 3 or 4 when a lot of that will be taking place on the event side. You know. When we were at capacity a couple times, what I would call capacity is, you know, we're pretty full at The Whistle, and the event side we had 2 parties with about 90 people. There were still about 20 spots that were open. You know, I went around and counted, and I didn't realize I needed to take photos and stuff like that, so I could certainly do that, and we will be doing it. You know, so that's kind of where, you know, where we're at. I know we have a requirement of 91. I understand you got to plan for full capacity, but, you know, and the other thing too is a lot of those spots, I mean, we try to be fair to the community. There's probably 10 to 12 to 14 cars that park on the south side that are residents that park their cars instead of in their driveways, they park their trucks and everything over there. I don't want to, you know, do that, and, you know, the landlords has certainly said if we wanted to, we could tow people and stuff, but that's not what we're about. So, you know, I kind of politely, if we get into a situation with them, also you know, could you move your car to your driveway versus using our parking spaces? Because it is a little bit of an issue, you know, at times, you know, that they're always parking there. So I would just ask you to consider, and the biggest reason we want to split is, one, you know, he's a business partner on that side.
I'm not a part of the business on the other side.
He's not a part of business on the other side. It's very hard for us, you know, to operate from a POS system. You know, right now we're doing it, but, you know, there's monies to be deposited. You know, all the vendors, you know, I got to go through and split a liquor bill. I got to split a food vendor bill. I got to split, you know, the linen bill. I got to split the, you know, everything that we do, you know. And, you know, the liquor company's delivering under The Whistle. I got to, you know, we have to do that, which, you know, adds time and money and stuff like that, but, you know, and we're already operating as The Whistle, so the parking issue, you know, we don't see it as an issue, but it's just helping us operate better and more efficiently if we can split the businesses. So thank you for your time. You want to add anything?
I'd just like to reiterate, though, it's already going to be operating as the Whistle. There's no additional parking. Why do we need additional? I know the parking is a little stretched, but why would we need to change it? Just because of the business sense. They're two different LLCs, and we're trying to split the time of the cost and all that together down the middle. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, I just want to explain just a little bit about the zoning. I understand what you're saying in terms of it's existing there, but that's the way the code is written.
No, I understand that.
It's, the special use process is designed specifically so that the village board can consider these impacts and make sure that they protect uses. So that's why they created it as a special use. You're right, you can continue to exist as you are, and, you know, if the parking becomes an issue and is not contained on site, you know, there's other recourses that the village can do. Hopefully that isn't the case. We're pro-business, we want to make sure everybody's successful. The issue on this particular project is, you know, and hopefully the landlord controls that. You know, you always hope that a landlord understands where his big users are, and he obviously is very happy to have you there, but there's no control of what else he's going to bring in terms of the vacancies that could cause you problems, could impact your parking, you know. If, I think there was a fitness center that was on the north side? Up there?
Right next to it.
Yeah, no, it's close. But if another one were to come in there, for example, and impact your parking field for your banquet, that would be devastating for you because you're wanting to provide good parking in close adjacency to your banquet facility. So that's why it's all looked at, and it's looked at comprehensively, and making sure that we keep all that parking on the premises. So.
Okay, thank you, Paul. At this time, I'm going to ask the commissioners if they have any comments on this item. I'll start with Commissioner Fielder.
Circle back to me.
Okay, I will start with Commissioner Vick.
All right. This time I'll go first instead of passing it on there. No, being that I live right over there, I am familiar with the way the parking does kind of work in that mall there. I have gone to that facility, the Mexican restaurant, the liquor store, the pizza place when it was there. Pizza place noting though that it is not an eat-in facility, it's a pickup only, you know, it's a carry-out place. But with that being said, you know, there are, even on when I've seen them on the busiest nights, I do feel that there has been adequate parking for what is there, and they could handle more. Looking at just the little counts the police did at those different times, of course, for the bar side of it, those would definitely be Friday and Saturday nights are definitely a little bit more peak times, and then of course, excuse me, Sunday during the days when there are big games or anything like that, you know, there are some decent crowds there. Even with the deficiencies that are here, I think it would be well tolerated. What is your occupancy on the event side? How many people? 99, I think. Okay.
They have a
Okay, about
seating,
90.
seating of 78,
Okay,
but
seating,
a
okay.
fire capacity of 99. However, he mentioned that there were 90 people
Yeah.
at the last
Yeah,
facility, so
for
it could
that.
be 90.
So, the parking, it is, the one thing that is nice, that the residents directly, the multifamily, the apartments to the east there, are shielded from the parking in that respect because of the garage row there, which is nice, which is one reason I looked at when we were first talking about this text amendment here for the special use stuff, back in July, I think it was, that it would work in this situation, I believe. So I really don't have, the parking considerations. We're looking at this right now, just looking at the numbers you have here on the parking stuff, that deficiency is for the entire place. At those peak times, the grocery store, at those times, I should say, when probably more likely to have events going on there, the evening type things, events, places like the grocery that is in there. Really, I'm not sure what time that closes, but, I'm sure it wouldn't be, too much leeway into that. That backside, that south end that goes to 159th place, I mean, yeah, there's no, I don't know who's parking there, from what they're saying. So there are spaces available even at peak hours that I think this would handle. I really do. I believe that it would handle it. I would want to watch though for the streets, because I have seen it just, sometimes there are cars parked along that, I don't know where those cars are for. Some for residences, I'm sure, that are parked on the street out there. Maybe some for the bar, because maybe they're a little closer than some of the other spots, but, I don't know that for sure, of course, and that's happening now. So, and with plenty of spaces available, so. That's all I've got, just comments about the parking itself, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Vick. Commissioner Gaskell, do you have any comments?
My concern would be the parking. I understand how that works and with vacancies there and some of the other businesses not actually needing what they have. But, with the square footage requirement, the spaces per square foot and stuff, it just, that takes up half the lot of what's there. If you go by the square footage, and that's what's in the ordinance. So that would be my concern.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Gaskell. Commissioner Aitchison.
Parking's a tough one because when certain businesses are really busy, other businesses are not busy. I had been to that establishment during peak times, and I've always been able to find a place to park, and there's always been additional parking around the other side. My only concern would be like on Sundays when you have brunch and there's a Bears game. But I still don't see the entire lot being full, or there not being parking in the lot.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fielder.
I guess for me, it's already operating now as a banquet facility, correct? It's
Not a banquet facility by our code. It's
But
a party
I mean,
room for Whistle Bar and Grill.
so it's simply working as they want to do it, but under just the Whistle right now.
Correct.
Is there a way, I guess the question is, do we have time to let them prove that the parking isn't an issue, since they're already operating in this type of capacity? Because the village has helped them out saying, if you want to operate that way, here's the way to do it, and they've started that process. But we have a concern about parking. If there's a way to just say, let's give them 6 months and let's see how it works out.
You could recommend that.
I mean,
That's their
that'd be my
choice.
recommendation. I mean, if we haven't done a parking, there's no official parking study. And everybody says
thought they
that's the
had-
one
I
thing
thought
that
they had
everybody's
one done.
concerned with is the parking, but they say it's
They
like,
don't.
it doesn't fill up, and right now it's working, but I understand the village's concern, saying if the landlord does fill it up, then
And
it
it's
could
new
become a
business.
problem.
It's a new catering business.
Yeah,
I mean, they
and
haven't
so,
really got their business up.
I think because they're able to operate now under their current status, doesn't that allow the village time to they can prove themselves to the village and to the commission, saying parking's not an issue, or parking's going to become an issue 6-9 months from now? They've got that. Do we have time to put this on pause and let them get going and see how the parking actually operates?
That's their choice. They're before us now to look for a special use, and as such, we have to look at the special use considerations, which has parking requirements. As a restaurant room, we don't have, even though it sounds synonymous to you, it's a different parking requirement, and our controls are different. So, we created this opportunity for them so that they could look at this as a banquet facility. But
it'd be more advantageous to them to keep it as the way it is in terms of the parking requirements.
certainly. But I think they expressed they don't want to do that.
Yeah, well, I
So
heard
How
that.
many people, how many
Yeah,
people,
it's
what's
not-
the capacity of the restaurant?
The restaurant has, again, it's done by 3 seats. It has, I have it on here. They have 128 seats as designed by the architect, but they have a fire occupancy limit of 166 people.
Because I'm gonna tell you, I've been there on a night that you guys had just had people in the banquet area and there was a fight going on. There was not a parking spot to be had. People were parked on the street. So I know, I've been there. I drove around the parking lot 3 times. So you can't say that there's adequate parking. And that was one of the first nights that you let people in to the banquet area that were there for the fight.
I didn't let anybody into the banquet area.
I
that
don't,
was there for the
I
fight.
know that there were people in there. So,
Okay.
but whatever, that's beside the point. I'm just saying there was not enough parking at all. So if you're telling me that you're gonna have a banquet facility that holds 90 people, and then your restaurant holds 166, and let's say, 75% of that drives themselves.
I would disagree with that, because most people that come to a banquet or a funeral luncheon or stuff like that, they actually carpool a lot more than that. I mean, we don't see the individuals drive like they do to a bar to meet their buddies. So,
I would prefer to have a parking study done when you have an event in the evening and there's something else going on in the evening, because I think that's where you're gonna run into your problem.
and the fight's the fight's a very unique night.
But I've been there on a Sunday night too, when you've had football, and it's been packed.
There's never not been parking on a Sunday night. I mean, I'm not here to argue, I'm just telling you the facts. But, let me ask you this too. We've been in talks with Marquette Bank. I mean, if we were to do something with, valet, which is an extra expense to us, would that eliminate your all's concern?
Where would you valet the cars to? Because
The bank
if I'm
parking
looking
lot.
at this,
To
everything
Marquette,
else is
across the
residential.
street.
Market Bank.
Yeah,
The Marquette Bank across the street from the Whistle.
the policy with that is this, where that certainly, from a short-term perspective, could certainly alleviate some problems. But there's no guarantee for a board, once they approve something, that agreement is
Okay, I'm
intact
just asking
between-
questions.
It would help, I'm certainly, and it's, it might impact them.
Yeah,
I just wanted to
so-
get that number right, Angela. Actually, I'm looking at the architect's plan. Between the 2 spaces, it's 265.
265.
I'll, I guess I'll send it to Orland Park, but that's in Orland Park, and I know they have parking requirements and other businesses parking and other,
Well,
so
I've been in-
check with Orland Park's planning
Oh,
department
yeah.
on that.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
So that they've recently removed
I'm just asking a
some other
question.
businesses from using parking of other businesses, so just check with them to see if it's possible.
But, to answer your question, sir, the 6 month, I mean, we're going for approval, so that's what we want to do, because the 6 months thing's gonna cost us a lot more money, with POSs and stuff like that. So, thank you.
Yeah, I had forgotten, that's a good point Dan brought up, and Orland's ordinances are not unlike ours. We don't allow parking on another parcel for one parcel, so you can't park on a separate lot. It has to be contained on your lot.
And I don't think you want guys running across the street.
Well, that would be, especially if they've been drinking, that would scare me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Valets wouldn't do that.
Any more comments, Commissioner Gatto?
Well,
There's
No, that's all I
not,
have.
yeah, and there's not a crosswalk immediately right there, I don't think.
that would scare me a little bit.
Okay, Commissioner Gatto has no more comments, so Commissioner Manny, do you have any comments?
Just, I guess I concur, the main issue is the parking. Like right now, as Commissioner Fuller said, can we test it? And I don't think you can test it because we have five vacancies, correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, to really test it, it would have to be full. And, we don't know what type of business would take up one, I mean, it could be another restaurant, And per the study, yeah, I mean, half the parking lot's already taken up, by the Whistle and the proposed catering, so, yeah, I think the issue is you have to contain, the parking, in that parking lot, but that'll be impossible if we have full vacancy of all spaces. And then you'll have people parking, say, across the street, that could be, people could get hurt, or people parking in the residential district, and then people will, hey, you're parking, I parked there, and then that's another thing, fights or whatever, so I think that's just, it's, I'm glad that you guys are doing excellent, but it's just kind of like you know, like a tough spot. You know. But those are my comments. You know.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Manny.
Just really quick, I just kind of wanted to add something here, is that, and I think, you know, Commissioner Fielder kind of hit on it already, is the fact that both spaces are already up and operating. What we're looking at here, because they want to separate the two, it's almost an administrative thing, kind of thing, because they're already out, they've already got permission to operate both spaces. It's not like because we approve this, they're going to be able to add a bunch more seating or have a bunch more people. The village has already approved them to operate both these spaces. They just want to, I think it's, and it sounds like it's due to it on the administrative side to help cut their costs. So they have the separate things, so they have the separate stuff going on. The parking now becoming an issue to stop them from making their administrative changes, I think that's kind of almost silly, I think, to some extent here, because they've already been, like I said, they can keep, if we don't approve this for two separate businesses, they can continue to operate.
Right.
You know?
But what happens when other people take occupancy in the mall there?
Right.
Who's responsible for that then?
Well, at that point, if it becomes problematic,
The
then
landlord-
each of those businesses are going to be called into question. And I think at this point, we can see that they will have the biggest problem because they're taking 50% of the parking. So, you know, that's the whole point of doing this, really going through the special use before opening. Because we don't want to be in a position where we're closing down a business or looking like we're anti-business. So we had encouraged them to go through the special use in the beginning, but they elected to go this route. So it's difficult because we don't want to be in this position.
Right,
We're
but-
trying to protect the other businesses in the center.
And the
You know,
residences.
you hope the landlord, but he's got a business to run and he's sitting there looking at 5 vacancies and I don't know what he would.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, you know, you have to look at the facility fully, 100%, non-vacancy, right? Because the owner, he wants to, I'm sure, rent that because, that's his business, right? So if a proposed business comes in and says, hey, okay, I want to put another restaurant or whatever, and then, okay, how many parks have we got? And then, that potential customer or renter or what have you might say, it's not going to work here. They're already overparked or something, and let's go find someplace else. And then that owner loses, a potential, renter, it's.
There's not really any room for a restaurant in the strip mall. I would love to see the strip mall get fully capacity because
Well,
it
yeah, I mean-
would help taxes for the village and everything. So my question would be, if there's going to be multiple use, like office space, things like that, people are there in the daytime, at nighttime, we're having an event, I don't see the overlap. And then the other question I would have would be, if they do, God, hopefully they do, they fill up the mall, the 5 vacancies, are we going to have to shut down? Are they going to tell us to shut down one of our buildings or?
Yeah.
We're ready.
That's why I said that's why the beauty of having it as a special use, we wouldn't be in that predicament.
Robert, if I may, why, so the plan along was to have 2 separate entities, right?
Right,
The
because-
WEC.
Go ahead.
So, and in order to do that, you would need the special use to be approved. So, I mean, I gotta say, government usually moves slow, but June of last year, the ball was rolling on these banquets. So, we're not even a year from that, and the proper rules are in place. Couldn't you guys have just pumped the brakes? I know you guys said it's kind of cost prohibitive for, having the door and going back and forth, but just in the beginning, why didn't you guys just wait to see, to follow like the protocols? I'm just asking.
I don't have an answer. We started a business and we didn't know there'd be a parking problem. Because we're already operating.
Yeah, but I mean,
Well, it
like,
took a long time for the build out.
yeah.
So we've been renting there since, we started, obviously.
Now, that's what, his question is, why not wait until you get the special use before you do the build out?
Yeah.
We were never told we needed a special use.
That's not correct.
I don't know, I'm lost for words.
Well, we were told we needed to go for special use, but we were also told we could build out under the whistle, so we'd already submitted for our, we already had money, we'd already signed the lease because we didn't foresee it being an issue. So that's really the thing. We had signed the lease with the landlord. He didn't tell us it was a B1, okay? So we already committed to a 3-year, or 5-year lease, okay? It's a substantial amount of money. So then when we come to apply for the permits and everything, then we were told we needed a special use. So that's the answer. We're on the hook. I mean, we've been paying, $4,000 a month for, a year and a half, which is a lot of money. So the landlord didn't tell us that. Okay, then when we, come here, we were told there was a special use. Okay, so then we all met and they were gracious enough to say, okay, well, you can open us the whistle and put a door in, so. And there was a little confusion around that, but that's where we're at right now, so. You're probably right. We wouldn't have signed if we would have known that there was a requirement, okay? We wouldn't have signed a lease, and we would have found another spot in Tinley or somewhere else to do it.
Okay.
But we didn't realize that, so.
Okay. And one thing
We're on
too,
the hook.
I know you guys do bang up business. I would go to the yoga instructor, and even on like a Monday and Wednesday, you had crowds, probably Monday Night Football, at the Whistle. And to Commissioner Gatto's point, she observed a full parking lot. So I know you guys do get a lot of people, and that's attributed to the good business you do. But I do think you mentioned that you had done a count, unofficial count, and there was, you said 20 spaces
Yeah, it was
open?
like 20 spaces.
And do you remember what date that was?
I don't.
was
I'd have-
Sunday.
Oh, it was
There was a party for the birthday.
But I mean, I'm just trying to get approximate, because I know the police were doing counts in early February.
I don't have the book in front of me right now.
Okay, no worries, but I think it's this, the crux of it is the parking. I'd say to put yourself in a position of power. Get a parking study, a traffic study done, as the village has requested, and that way you can get an idea. And I do agree to Commissioner Manny's point and what the staff had said. You get, even with that, if you had counted 20 spaces, you're at 58% capacity. So over time, as other businesses come in, there could be a potential. So in terms of just being able to, I guess, put yourself in a position to persuade, a traffic study would do you guys a lot of good, I would think. If you believe firmly that you'll have no problems with parking, get that by a professional in writing to forearm yourself. I know you guys got the business up and going, and like I said, I've been in there for my yoga instructor. I know you bring the customers there. There's a reason why that parking lot, that we're discussing parking, is because you guys bring a bulk of that. But I do think nothing's stagnant, and as potentially new tenants come in, you might have some issues. And as staff had mentioned, parking is a science, so depending on when you guys operate versus when other people operate, it may work out fine. But
Well, that's the thing, we open at 2 AM. Our parties aren't gonna be open at 2 AM. And the second thing is 90%, pretty much everybody else closes. I mean, they're closed. I mean, the chiropractor's out of there at 5. I mean, the liquor store closes at 10 or 11. The Mexican joint shuts down. The barber shop certainly is not open. The grocery store is not open. So we pretty much operate the entire space.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be argumentative, I'm just telling you from our standpoint, it's frustrating as a business owner. We gave, and I know this isn't why we're here, but, I have a spreadsheet, we gave over $100,000 back to the community last year for, donations, for, sports, scholarship programs, all this stuff. And, we got $250,000 invested in a facility, and, there's been a lot of confusion around it, because there's other people that aren't in this room that told us, yeah, go ahead and do this and this and that, and none of that matters. We're here before you today, and we're operating as the Whistle, so that, like he said, this is not gonna, that's not changing, and then, the landlord, my feedback to him is he's not putting another restaurant in there. I mean, there's just no possible way that they could even do that. It's office spaces inside of office spaces, so, but, we appreciate your
Also,
consideration.
the events business and catering business is not gonna be booked every day.
That's another thing.
well, I mean, to your point, I agree with that. If you got a Super Bowl or something, it's something that's going to be a little bit more packed, or a fight or whatnot. But and we appreciate the contributions to the community for sure, Mike. The thing is, the crux is the parking. what's preventing you from just getting an engineer, parking, to do a traffic study designed to see if there will be indeed
That's the
spillage?
thing too, and I'm not trying to, I mean, I'm not being, again, argumentative. We were told just walk around and do I didn't know I had to go out and hire, if I knew that I had to go hire an independent parking person to do that, I don't even know who that is or never heard of that, we'd already done that, okay? I thought the village was doing the parking study, so.
No, the
that's-
village doesn't do the
Okay, well,
parking study. yeah.
This is the first time hearing that, I mean, there's an email saying that we needed photos and stuff, but at no time, I didn't know, did you know that we had to go out and get the?
No, they just asked us to monitor the.
Is that something you would consider going forward, just to
We'd have to
try
look
to
into
make headway so that, yeah, I mean, is it reasonable to do that so
I
that?
don't know anything about it, sir. I don't know how much it costs, I don't know
Okay,
anything about.
Do you have any
it.
recommendations on the
Right.
hire for that?
okay.
We can't recommend any one consultant, but I can tell you at least maybe 3 other companies that other people use.
There's a handful of 3 that do 90% of the ones we get here, so we can maybe
Just because we,
use
yeah,
some of those.
I mean, I don't,
done
I
it
don't,
before, so.
One of the things that, success breeds a lot of customers, and one of my concerns is anytime my wife and I go to Cooper's Hawk, there's spillage there. That's not intentionally, but we want to avoid that with the residential there to the south. And I know you guys bring in, like, great business, like, absolutely great business. So, you can only help yourself by getting an official study and then going from there, in my opinion.
And it can help the landlord too, then it'll show, it'll make some assumptions for the parking in the other spaces, and that's really, it'll be attached to the special use, but it can really be used by the landlord and you guys to make sure you have parking going forward, and you guys don't start, if you only have 50 parking spaces, but you need, and people start eating into your parking spaces, it affects your business. So I think that's a really good document that you can kind of help the landlord also. Here's the spaces you have left to rent these vacancies.
And I will also say, Mike, I do feel your pain on that,
Mark,
like,
it's Mark.
or Mark, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
I apologize, Mark. Is that, you mentioned potentially some residents have friends over and they park in that parking lot. I mean, I'm sure the traffic study might be able to even identify some of those, but the landlord should be taking care of towing, in my estimation, patrolling that so that all the businesses aren't impacted negatively from
Well, it's a
potential.
double-edged sword for us, because when we tow them, then they don't come and send money at the bar, so it's kind of. It's just a fact, I mean, the Budweiser guy parks right there.
Okay.
So, and then, I mean, it's like, don't be the villain in the neighborhood, because they're walking over to, patronize the place, so it's kind of tough
Right.
in that regards. That's why I'm against the towing. I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Understand, I'm just saying, like, if
But we get
you
a lot-
got 10
we get a lot of
spots and.
customers, especially with the bylaws and everything, which is good, that they walk to, to the bar
Okay, well,
and the restaurant.
sure. Do you guys have any questions at this time for staff, in terms of, going forward? Some of the open items, any direction on those open items? The traffic study is one of them.
That's really the main one.
Okay. Do you, Mark and Robert, do you have any other questions? Just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, so that for the next meeting, everybody's forearmed and ready.
Okay.
Well, can we call you and get some,
Sure.
not recommendations, but numbers of people to call?
Sure, absolutely.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Robert. And we will have the public, so.
If you want still there?
No, we're going to have, it was erroneously published that there was a public hearing on this, but it's not till 2 weeks. So the public hearing will be in 2 weeks in this room on March 5th. So.
But you need to open it.
Yeah, okay, I'm
Table
gonna,
it to dates.
I'm gonna do that right now. So, but you can stay here, Robert, if you want me while I open it.
It's a formality.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Robert. May I have a motion to open the public hearing for item 3, the Whistle Banquet
Make a motion.
Facility? Okay, Commissioner Vick, seconded by,
Commissioner Gaskell was first.
oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Gaskell.
But I'll second it.
Commissioner Vick seconded. And I do have confirmation of the public notices being completed. However, as I mentioned before, they were erroneously published in error because it was intended to be on March 5th, 2020. Yeah, so prematurely, I should say. Is there anyone wishing to testify on this item here, since we are open? Seeing nobody in the audience, can I get a motion to table the public hearing until March 5th, 2020?
So moved.
Commissioner Fielder, and seconded by Commissioner Vick.
Or Gaskell, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry,
They sounded like-
Commissioner Gaskell. I didn't see, I just heard.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say the same. Okay, motion carries. If there's no further questions or discussion, may I have a motion to close the public hearing on this item? Commissioner Fielder?
Second.
Commissioner Aitchison, seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, again, there will be a public hearing on this matter at the March 5th, 2020 regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting. Next, we'll move on to item 4. The fourth item on the agenda this evening is a workshop text amendment, masonry and short-term rental clarification to consider recommending that the village board grant a proposed text amendment to the Tinley Park zoning ordinance clarifying section 12.3.a legacy code uses and section VB schedule of regulations for short-term rental uses and section VC4B masonry requirements for the residential masonry requirements. The purpose of this amendment is to clarify portions of 2 recent code updates for masonry requirements on residential properties and for short-term rental allowances. Staff, at this time, if you can make your presentation.
Sure, because you had so much fun opening and closing that last public hearing, we decided to do it again. So we accidentally published this one too, so it'll be the same opening, closing, and we'll continue it. So this was published as one, but we just, with anything with the zoning code, especially text amendments, we want it to be 2 meetings with a workshop and a public hearing separately, so. This really is just kind of cleanup for recent code text amendments that came through you guys and approved by the village board. Like any text amendments, it gets to the point where we start to use them, and then you see things that maybe you didn't think about in kind of a general context. So both of these were that. Once we started using the code, we kind of went, we didn't think about this situation, or maybe this wording was not what was really intended. So the first one is really the masonry. We spent a lot of time during the exterior requirements for the masonry on commercial properties, and that was really, we were bringing it from the building code to the zoning code, but at the same time, we really wanted to build in a little more flexibility and really take a new look at the commercial aspects of it. What we didn't focus so much on was the residential. We've kind of just carried that over how it's always been. And that's requiring masonry, specifically brick and stone on the first floor of a residential home. So that's kind of been the requirement since the 70s. But when we adjusted the definition of masonry, we added in concrete panels as an allowable material, thinking of commercial properties. But we didn't change the residential code, so what our proposed text amendment here is gonna do is still make it clear that single-family homes can't be built out of precast concrete panels, which I don't think was the intent of it. So that's just kind of what this does, is deletes a small line in there. And so it'll be brick or decorative stone that has to be used for first floor, single-family homes. So that one's relatively simple. The other code clarification in the zoning code is for short-term rentals that was here a few months ago. That it has kind of 2 aspects to it. One is dealing with it was kind of, it was a long process from like June to December, I think, almost, that it came before you guys, went to the village board, came back before you guys. In that time, we added in some separation requirements for single-family homes, as well as kind of a capacity requirement on multifamily properties. So 500 feet between kind of single-family properties attached or detached, and then a 25% maximum for multifamily properties. What we didn't consider in that is, well, we added that multifamily requirement into the R6 and R7 that do allow for multifamily properties. Those zoning districts actually also allow for single-family homes. So and there are single-family homes in those zoning districts. So what we proposed are just some minor tweaks, and we add the kind of sub-note to that R6 and R7 zoning districts, and we just clarify the wording on those, that it's multifamily dwellings, and then we have definitions for single-family detached dwellings, single-family attached dwellings, single-family semi-detached dwellings, and two-family dwellings. So we have the definitions of those, and those will all be regulated by the feet rule from another one, and then we also still keep the multifamily dwelling. So that's just a minor cleanup, but just kind of assuming that because those were multifamily districts, that there was no single-family homes, but there is, so. Lastly is, when we were talking about this, we were looking at our typical zoning districts, but we didn't really, and this is the one where we do need a little bit of policy direction on, from you guys in the village board, because it wasn't really discussed much, and it's a little more than just clarification, is how we deal with short-term rentals in the legacy district. There's multiple different districts in there. It's our Oak Park Avenue corridor, with the downtown core, running from 183rd Street to 167th. So the kind of two options to this, and this becomes a little bit difficult because within that district, it's meant to be kind of an urban core. So there's a bunch of different uses all mixed together. So there's single-family homes, there's townhomes, there's multifamily, there's apartments, condos, and mixed-use buildings that have commercial and apartments on top, or condos on top. So, and those are all right next to each other. So they kind of don't, the mix is good because it creates an urban environment, but it doesn't kind of regulate itself the same way our other zoning districts do that are very separate, very specific uses. So the kind of two options that are out there is one, prohibiting short-term rentals, which could negatively impact current or future uses, can kind of maybe stop development of properties if they use it as a short-term rental. And also note that a boarding or room house is kind of a similar use that's prohibited in legacy districts, very similar. So that's an existing one that's prohibited out there. And then two is it's kind of difficult in our zoning code, or I guess three, is we have the uses run between all the legacy code districts. So it's kind of, it separates them from office and retail and residential uses, and then there's special uses and prohibited uses, but they kind of run between all the districts. So it's fairly hard to say, well, we want this in the downtown core, but we don't want it in the neighborhood general portions of it, because we don't have any other uses that are really separated that way in our code. There are some benefits, though. So if you guys do decide, maybe this is something that could work in the legacy district, we would need some direction on how do you see that being regulated with all these mixed uses. But it could potentially bring some visitors into the downtown, which is good for businesses. It's not a permanent resident, but compared to a vacancy, you get visitors that are kind of more likely to spend their money down there. And you have the train station, especially near the downtown core, that kind of, if someone's gonna, from the outside, look at an Airbnb or any of the short-term rental sites, you know, the downtown is an attractive place. You could go to and from the city from there fairly quickly. It's not far from the amphitheater or wherever else you'd be coming from Tinley to visit and stay. So there are some advantages there. So we're kind of just have it open to feedback. Obviously, prohibiting's the easier option, but if you guys have some thoughts about how can that be regulated in the legacy district, if you're considering that, would be helpful. So.
Okay, thank you, Dan. At this time, I'll ask the commission for any comments, and I guess specifically focus on whether we recommend opening up that Legacy District to short-term rentals. I'll begin with Commissioner Manning.
I don't have any comments at this time.
Commissioner Gatto?
I don't have any comments either.
Commissioner Fielder?
No, nothing at this time. I just circle back.
Commissioner Aitchison?
No comments at this time.
Commissioner Gaskell?
Nothing for me neither.
Commissioner Vick?
You got it right that
It's a topic that, I mean, it's, for some of the residential stuff, yeah, in residential areas, I definitely see it as a legacy district, because it sounds like you want to keep it as one district and not break it down into the subgroups there. I personally might, if we have to keep it to one kind of thing, one for the whole legacy district, then I would say, yeah, we would almost have to look at it on the prohibiting side, going that easy route of doing that. If we were willing to break it down into some of the groups that may be a little bit more prone to get some of these short-term rental things, then yeah, we'd have to look at that, I think. But, the easy way, of course, like you said, it is the easy way just to prohibit it, since we're talking about this stretch of land, this whole stretch that encompasses multiple zones. So, yeah, I don't have anything productive to say about it, basically.
That's kind of how our dialogue and discussion happened amongst staff. We were kind of the same mind, and I think some of this is still being tested. Obviously, I think the board had very much concerns about it impacting the residential character of the rest of our community. So right now, it's tied to a license that only allows one a year. Now, licenses can change. I mean, you could take the attitude to wait and see where the demand bubbles up. We just didn't want to be, not global in our review, in that, certainly in some areas it's looked at as a tourist attraction and it could benefit a downtown. We may not be there yet. We haven't had that kind of demand. We haven't anybody come to us and say, why aren't you letting me do this in the Legacy District? So.
Do we
Did
know
you
how
look
many
at any
properties we
towns
have?
that already have districts like this? Like Downers Grove kind of has an area like this, kind of like along their train, where their train station is and stuff like that. Do they have any kind of, any other towns have experiences? I know Western Springs is developing the district like this, kind of mixed like this, so do they have any guidance or plans right now that you know of?
I know when we initially went through this, I don't remember anyone calling out that they treated their downtown areas differently.
Any differently?
So I forget what those are now, but we can go back and look, but I don't remember anyone, we had that kind of list of towns, and
Yeah.
did you allow short-term rental, did they not?
In those.
Did they have distance requirements? I don't remember anything coming out of that as we treat yes, but we treat our downtown differently.
Okay.
Than the rest of the town.
If you recall, this only became an issue because of a problem.
Yes, oh, yeah.
So, this first step was stepping off from a negative situation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I guess if you try to be prudent, prohibiting it is the most conservative way to go.
Yes.
To dovetail on this, I mean, because the Legacy District is such a diverse area. I mean, just really, maybe just centering it around the train station and the immediate downtown area, because that's where most of our tourism's gonna be, that's where most of our development, new development's gonna be in the coming future, where I could see it being advantageous to the village to allow it. Not the full, I don't think the full district, no, but if we're.
The
if we-
downtown core.
I think the conversation should center on the downtown core if we do anything at all.
And that's where we were at, and so this is at least good that it would be reflected in the minutes, you know, for future planners or whatever, to say, hey, you know, they really thought about it, and they felt at the time maybe there wasn't a demand, but I didn't want to not give us an opportunity to discuss it, because I think it could be an economic advantage to the downtown.
And
I
think if-
agree.
I think if and when they change the licensing, because the licensing's more restrictive than the zoning right now. So if they really said, we want to promote this more, then I think it'd be good to look at the zoning in general again, not just in the legacy district, but in general. So I think in all of the districts. So I think if and when they do that, it would be a good time to, again,
Right. And
we'd relook at the zoning.
time reveals all. As the downtown core gets built up, and we discussed this when we were talking about the STRs to begin with, in terms of the Airbnbs, that's technology-driven. So as the demand becomes more concrete, perhaps the demand for the STR will become more concrete as well, like you mentioned, like maybe there's a concert in town that they want to see, or something that's happening at the, the plaza, so, but you got to at least put those steps in place, and like you said, you might have to tweak it a couple years down the road, but I wouldn't necessarily, 100% say prohibited. I think you want to kind of leave the door open for potential, potential Airbnbs, but it does have to be focused, as some of the commissioners mentioned.
See, and that's a problem.
Can we allow it as a special use?
Yeah, so that's kind of the problem. It's really getting complicated, and I guess at the end of the day, after we had a pretty healthy discussion, if right now, the way the board is looking at this, and even if we said yes, go do it anywhere, they only can have one a year. So it's, the licensing is the diminishing factor on this, and it's limiting anything of really happening for what you would think you would want in a downtown core.
But
So why go there now? You
Yeah.
could prohibit it now, and then it could always change later.
That's true, good point.
It's just to try to figure out how to make this happen only in one district, because that's not the way the legacy
Right.
district works.
Yeah.
Whatever can happen in all the districts.
Mhm.
And, we were just trying to play around with language and how we would put it in the code, and it was just really becoming a nightmare, and I don't think it's worth it, because we could do all that, and then they could only have one a year.
And we have the distance requirements and everything else. So everything else is very simple. The code tries to be simplified and condense stuff to make it simpler for the whole district. But then this would end up being a whole separate section and a paragraph. So not that you want to make zoning decisions purely based on that, but then when we started to think about what's the advantage of
Right.
even doing that with the licensing, makes it.
Maybe the time's not right. Maybe, like you said about revisiting it, maybe in 2 or 3 years, the demand then is there, so, maybe prohibiting is the right route to go right now.
We just didn't want you to think we weren't thinking.
Okay.
And like anything
All
else, when stuff comes up and it's prohibited, sometimes there are those things that kind of start the conversation.
Right.
Like the banquet.
Like Whistle and the banquet.
Right.
you
The
know.
banquet.
We didn't change the code just for them. We want to take a whole look at it, but sometimes it's that one thing that comes
Yeah,
up.
they were
and then,
prohibited. Banquets were prohibited.
Or if the board starts saying, look at our downtown, it's doing great, we want to take a new look at the short-term rental requirements, we can relook at them then.
Which we prohibit banquets in the legacy district, just so you know.
Which is how I caught this. I was like, where's the short-term rental? When I was putting in the banquet into the prohibited section, so.
Okay, if there's no further questions or discussion on this item, may I have a motion to open the public hearing for this item, the Whistle Banquet Facility, 7537, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong. May I have a motion to open the public hearing for item 5, text amendment, masonry, and short-term rental clarification?
So moved.
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Fielder and then Commissioner Gaskell seconded the motion. Got it right this time. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. I do have confirmation of the public notices. They were prematurely posted, so the actual public hearing is intended to be on March 5th, 2020, here in the council chambers. Seeing nobody here wishing to speak, can I get a motion to table the public hearing on this item until March 5th, 2020 at the Plan Commission?
So moved.
Commissioner Aitchison, seconded?
Second.
Commissioner Fielder. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. If there are no further questions or discussion, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Fielder,
Second.
I hear second. Commissioner Gatto.
You don't close it, don't close it. You
Yeah,
open
so
it
it's just
and table it.
Oh,
So it stays open.
okay, we just tabled it then. Okay, so we don't need to close. Okay,
Yep.
we'll move on. There will be a public hearing on this matter at the March 5th, 2020 regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting. We'll move on to item 6. The 6th item on the agenda this evening is a public hearing for the zoning map update to consider recommending that the village board adopt the village's official zoning map reflecting map amendments through December 31st, 2019. May I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Gatto, do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fielder, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. I do have confirmation that the public notices had been posted and they were completed. So, is there, I guess, staff, if you want to give your presentation?
Yeah, so this is just kind of an annual, nothing's being rezoned here, so it's usually not even a truly formal public hearing because there's not really any testimony. There's no action being taken by you guys, other than you're reviewing just kind of annually the zoning map, which is a requirement that the state puts in just annually. Make sure you have a map that meets what you want. So we do this every year. Between last year and this year's, the biggest change was the annexation of Lenny's Food and Fuel and the rezoning to B3 for that parcel. So that's kind of far south, the little red piece you see next to all the yellow, that's Lenny's. And then, so there were a couple other minor corrections we've made that we found were discrepancies. Most of them, I believe, were things that were shown as PUDs that were never actually formally approved as PUDs, which we have found happened on accident a lot in 1978 when they adopted a new zoning code and a new zoning map. It went to a whole new system. So we found a few errors over the years of things that are shown as PUDs that aren't PUDs. So just a few corrections there. But that's it. So we just need you guys, we're looking to bring this to the village board on March 3rd. So if you guys don't see any issues, got the full-size map if you are really interested.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Commissioners, any comments at this time? Okay, no commissioners making any comments. So do I need to, since this,
Did you give him a motion?
I just, yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't write the motion in here, but if you guys can just make a motion to recommend approval of the official zoning map. as
okay,
presented.
at this time, could I get a motion to recommend approving the zoning map?
So, make a formal motion? I'll make a formal motion to approve the 2019 zoning map as indicated by staff.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Fielder. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Vick. Could I get a roll call?
Manny,
Yes.
Gatto,
Yes.
Fielder,
Yes.
Gasko,
Yes.
Aitchison,
Yes.
Vic,
Yes.
Jim Gray.
Yes. Motion carries. Do I need to close this public hearing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so could I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Fielder,
Second.
Commissioner Gatto seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. The public hearing for this item is closed. This item will be heard by the village board on March 3rd, 2020. So at this time, we'll go to, I have March 3rd for the village board meeting.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry.
So March 3rd, 2020. At this time, staff, could you talk about the good of the order, if you have anything to present?
Yeah, I just have a couple quick ones. If you've been following some of the board meetings, you'll see that they did appoint a new building manager. So we have Jim Olstrom, who'll be starting on Monday. We've waited a long time. That position has been vacant for almost 4 years. So really, really happy to have him on board. I've talked to you on and off about our software. We're finally going to be up and running on that in March. We're doing training next week. Going to get that up. So that's a really nice thing for our residents as well. We're doing cashiering back in our area of the village right now, where before they'd have to walk around to the front and pay for their permits. So all customer and user-friendly, so we're very excited about that. It allows our inspectors to do everything out on tablets in the field, allows us to do electronic plan reviews.
Wow.
So we really expect to have the permit issuance shorter time, and be able to respond to the applications much quicker. In terms of new projects coming in, we've got a application for Thornton Gas Station on 191st and Panduit Drive. We're just beginning to look at it now. We also have Delta Sonic. I don't know if we've spoken to you about that. They have some changes to their existing site up here on 159th and Oak Park Avenue. So those are two projects making their way to you. The fees that you all looked at, and Dan worked, it's one of his most fun projects. Those go into place March 1st. So it's a really tedious and difficult project, and so I'm glad he did it, and not me. And so we'll see that, and the fees will be enforced beginning March 1st. The 7-Eleven project that you guys worked so hard on, that did get approved of the board. So not sure when we're going to see plans on that, so that's kind of exciting. And I think that was it. Is there something else?
No.
you could-
Holiday Inn's gonna be bringing in their building permit soon, and what was the other project that just, the Lenny's on 183rd that was approved. That has their permit in right now, so we're being reviewed. So those projects that are kind of new construction projects are both moving forward.
Yeah, that's where your job satisfaction comes in. You can drive around town and see your thumbprint, so, good.
Very
Thank
true.
you.
Okay, thank you, guys. At this time, I'd ask for comments from the public. Seeing there is none in the audience, I will move on. May I have a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Commissioner Fielder made the first motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Commissioner Aitchison seconded the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. This meeting is adjourned.